Good morning. March 22nd. My name is Michael Savoy. I'm the president of the California Board of Accountancy. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Start on this side with a roll call.
Luz Molina Lopez.
Carola Nicholson.
Michael Savoy.
George Caroline. Mark Silverman.
Alicia Berhal. Katrina Salazar.
Dan Jacobson.
Jose Campos.
Sochi Leon.
Kathleen Wright.
All right. We have a quorum. A little bit lopsided on this side. I see a little leaning, but maybe we'll deal with that. The CBA's mission is to protect consumers by ensuring only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. This mission is derived from the statutory requirement that protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the California Board of Accountancy in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary action functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. You may notice that some of our board members are referencing tablets during the meeting. These tablets allow the board members to be more accessible using these meeting materials and are not being used to discuss, deliberate, or take any action on any items within the board's jurisdiction. We're going to go to 12:15, and we're going to take an hour and 15 minutes and be back at a time certain, 1:30. So just let you all know. First item is resolution for retirement enforcement advisory. Items 1A through 1C are resolutions for retiring Enforcement Advisory Committee. EAC members for Nicholas Antonian, Dale Best, and Mary Rose Harris. Mr. Antonian served on the EAC from March 17th of 2016 to March 31st. Can I get a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Are we approving all three?
No, I'm doing one at a time.
Oh, all right, then I move the resolution for retiring Enforcement Advisory Committee member
Second.
Nicholas Antonian.
Any discussion? Public comment? Call for a vote.
Alicia Berhouse?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
George Pamela?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Sochi Leon?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Carola Nicholson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
And Kathleen Wright?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Mr. Best served as the EAC from March 20th, 2014 to March 31st, 2018. Can I get a motion to approve this resolution?
I move that we support the motion.
Second. For Dale Best, yes.
Any discussion, public comment? Please call for a vote.
Kathleen Wright?
Yes.
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Carola Nicholson?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Sochi Leon?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
George Pamela?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
And Alicia Berhouse?
Yes.
Okay, unanimously it passed. Ms. Karras served on EAC from March 25th, 2010 to March 31st, 2018. Can I get a motion to approve this resolution?
So move to approve the retirement enforcement advisory.
Second.
Any further discussion, public comment? Please call for a vote.
Alicia Berhouse?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
George Pamela?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Sochi Leon?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Carola Nicholson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
And Kathleen Wright?
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Next item, item 1D, provides members with information regarding opportunities to participate on committees with the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. NASBOR announced that those interested in serving on a committee for 2018-19 should complete the online committee interest form no later than April 18th, 2018. An overview of the time commitment for participation on NASMA committees is also provided on the attachment. Historically, staff have provided information regarding serving on volunteer committees with the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, or the AICPA. Recently, the AICPA transitioned to a new volunteer period that will end May of 2019. Staff will bring information for serving on the AICPA to a future meeting once the information has been received. To ensure that staff tracks CBA member interest, please email Rebecca Reed, who's the CBA Board Relations Analyst, when you submit an interest form and provide the committees you are seeking appointment to. If you have any questions regarding any of these NASBA committees, please also contact Rebecca Reed. Item E. National State Board of Accountancy, request for vice chair recommendations. Ms. Reed?
Agenda item 1E provides members with information regarding the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, or NASBA, nominating committee's request for recommendations from all state boards to serve as vice chair for the 2018-19 year. NASBA stated to be eligible to serve as vice chair, an individual must have served as a director at large or regional director for a minimum of 2 years, but needed not to be a current member of the board of directors at the time of his or her election. The deadline to submit recommendations to serve as the NASBA vice chair is April 18th, 2018. And at this time, the CBA has not received any requests for support from individuals seeking to serve as vice chairs.
Okay, thank you. Next item is a discussion and review of CBA actions regarding issues identified in the 2014 Sunset Review Report and new issues proposed to be included in the 2018 Sunset Review Report. Mr. Bone.
Good morning, Mr. President and members. The purpose of this item is to allow the CBA the opportunity to comment and provide feedback on several items proposed to be included in the CBA's 2018 Sunset Review Report. Ms. Pierce and Mr. Franzella will be available to help answer questions that the CBA members may have about this proposed content. During the Sunset Review process, after the CBA submits its Sunset Report to the legislature, legislative staff prepare recommendations to a board to consider and respond to. The CBA issued responses during its 2014 report and is expected to provide an update on the progress made on those same issues in its 2018 Sunset Review report. The 5 issues identified from the prior Sunset Review and contained in attachments 1 through 5 are the CBA's peer review program, disciplinary case management and timeframes, permanent practice restrictions, reserve levels in the accountancy fund, and consumer satisfaction. Each of the first 5 attachments are structured the same way. First, it includes the comments and directives posed by the legislature in 2014, then the comments provided by the CBA in 2014, and finally, the CBA's staff proposed comments for 2018. A Sunset Review report also provides a board the opportunity to report on emerging issues identified by that board or the legislature. So far in this version of the draft, staff have identified one such issue related to staffing. That item is contained in attachment 6 in your meeting materials. At this time, Mr. President, I would suggest that we go through each item one by one. With your permission, I'll briefly summarize the content of each item, beginning with attachment 1, and then pause to allow for questions or comments.
Go for it.
Thank you. Staff will use the feedback from the CBA members today to improve or revise this proposed content, which will be presented again for review and approval at a future CBA meeting later this year. So moving to attachment 1. The subject of this issue is the CBA's peer review program. In 2014, the legislature recommended the program be continued and requested that the CBA provide a report on the program to the legislature by November 1 of 2018. In our proposed 2018 response, staff discussed the CBA's analysis of the benefits of the peer review program. We also indicate that the CBA is working with CalCPA and AICPA to conduct a survey amongst those who would participate in the program. And with that, I will pause for questions or comments.
So this is a report that's in process that will be submitted by November 1st?
As a part of our obligations due in the sunset review process, the legislature sends over questions for each board to respond to. We've yet to receive those questions, but we're trying to be proactive and get ahead of things.
No, I understand what's in front of us here. I'm talking about the peer review program itself, this reference to a report to the legislature by November 1st.
Yes.
Yes.
That's, okay, so that, and which, that'll come before this board, or is it at the PROC level event here, or is it?
It's, it'll, most likely, some elements will go before the PROC, but timing-wise, we just don't know where this report's gonna land. It could be something we integrate into the sunset review report if there's time to do so. Otherwise, we'll have another standalone peer review report, but it'll come before the board for its consideration and input.
So we talked about peer review in the context of mobility, and that's the one thing that doesn't jump out off the page when you look at our prior response or our current proposed response. And I would say it probably needs to get woven in there, because from a ability of a out-of-state firm to, issue a test reports here, it seems pretty darn important, right? It's one of those criteria we look at, since we require peer review on anyone doing a test here. And that's the premise of this question, is do you include it or not, it seems, but I don't see how else you have a monitoring activity over the test practice of a CPA firm. So the long-winded comment there is, how do we incorporate that into our current response?
That's the question.
It's not a question, it's a comment, that I think we need to have that in there.
You will,
It's
yes,
important, yeah.
absolutely.
It's definitely important. Okay. Any other comments on this area? Questions?
Attachment 2. This issue discusses the CBA's disciplinary case management and timeframes. In 2014, the legislature indicated that the CBA made a concerted effort to reduce the disciplinary processing timeframes that are under its direct control. Further, the legislature stated that the CBA should continue to work with the Attorney General's office and the Office of Administrative Hearings to meet the 540-day processing timeframe target. In our proposed 2018 response, staff explained the history of the CBA's efforts to achieve this 540-day goal and the various factors and circumstances that impact our case management and processing timeframes. Are there any questions or comments about attachment 2?
Mr. Cobb?
Yes, so I think all of these, so I'm looking at the draft 2018 response, right, that we would have, and the question I jotted down here is there a way to give more color on the age of the open portfolio for formal discipline, right? Since that's kind of what will drive future statistics on closed cases.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that we're exploring already in the EAR. I think we took some information and added in the recent EAR. It was more towards closed cases and where they kind of fell in, but there's nothing, we could easily add that same information about where our case aging is and what's kind of in those buckets of, we already have that in our EAR, the 0 to 6 months, the 6 to 12 months. So that information can be integrated in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a great story to tell here, and you've done a good job of laying that out, but just trying to give a view of this is a condition that will continue to impact us as we clear off that portfolio.
Absolutely.
I don't know, I got other questions, but I don't know if anybody else has.
Keep going.
If I can read my own writing here now. So I'm looking at the end of, I guess there's not, is that a page number? What is this? Under enforcement program restructure, there's a paragraph at the end of that page.
Okay.
I don't know what, can't see the page number here.
Page 4.
Page
4, okay, sorry, I wrote over it. So we talked about the communications. I guess the question is, what would increase the timeline? Not quite, I wasn't overly specific there, but I was focused on that paragraph and any additional.
I think the idea behind that paragraph was just to kind of talk about the fact that, again, historically, the ICPA's handled almost every aspect of the investigation, including the administrative aspects of monitoring with the AG's office, working with the AG's office, dealing with citations, rather than solely focusing on their investigations. And that as the primary focus of a lot of the restructure that Ms. Bowers and I did when we brought over the staff was trying to alleviate all this administrative stuff that's important to the enforcement program and is necessary for consumer protection, and to ensure that matters are getting resolved timely, but to take that off of the ICPAs and even our non-technical investigative staff and move it to groups within our program area that can be responsible for, once an investigation is closed, if it's a citation, it gets off of the investigator, the report's already handled, and another staff can write up the citation. And same with AG following through the process, not putting it on the ICPA to stay on top of that so they can focus on their other investigations and workload. So this paragraph, I believe we can, if it's what you're looking for is to flesh that out more, I'm happy to do that, but that's kind of the idea behind that paragraph.
Yeah, and I wish I could give you more specificity on what the heck I had in mind, but it clearly, again, this is in the context of we're painting a picture, but I think the story behind it is very good in terms of the progress that's been made between reviews here. And I guess to that end, on the next page, you've got I think, a pretty cool chart on this. I would scale that differently. I would maybe start at a 1,000 case, day period, or whatever it is, to make the trends be a little more noticeable than what you really can see in this chart right now. And then the last comment on this point is, and I know we're still kind of continuing to draft this, but the chart on pending at the AG's office, and certainly some nice trends there, but even those, when they close, are going to have a huge impact on closure days, right? And so I didn't know if there was something either qualitatively below the chart that could provide context for the level of aging of these matters before they went to the AG's office. I think that's what the rest of your response paints already, but again, one thing to think about is there anything that you would either footnote to that, that would, and maybe it's just really focused on the most current version of the 81 cases that are pending, and really what's the relative age of before they went over there, of those particular matters.
Absolutely. A lot of the charts that we've added in, obviously you can see from our last response there, it's a lot of narrative, and you can get lost in it. So we started adding in the charts to try to give a different picture. So these charts are very, I guess, again, evergreen, and we're happy to kind of tinker with them to better illustrate, so that if somebody doesn't want to get lost in all the narrative, that there's another opportunity to kind of see trends and improvements within the enforcement process. So I can definitely append that particular one or add additional charts that subset out that 81 to continue to show improvements.
Yeah, again, if it helps kind of explain the story.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Next item.
Attachment 3. This is regarding permanent practice restrictions. In 2014, the legislature recommended the CBA be granted authority to include permanent practice restrictions in its disciplinary orders. The CBA was granted this authority effective January 1, 2016. In the CBA's proposed 2018 response, staff indicate that this is an effective consumer protection tool, and that since 2016, CBA took disciplinary action in 113 cases that resulted in a licensee being placed on probation. And of those cases, 51% included a permanent practice restriction. Any questions or comments on attachment 3?
Number 4.
Attachment 4 is regarding the reserve in the CBA's accountancy fund. In 2014, the legislature stated its desire for the CBA to have a reserve in its fund of approximately 24 months of authorized expenditures. In the CBA's proposed 2018 response, staff discussed the history of the CBA's fund condition, the results of its 2 fee analyses, repayment of the loans made to the general fund, and that the CBA approved in January of this year a rulemaking to increase its license renewal and initial permit fees from $120 to $250. Are there any comments about attachment 4? Moving to 5, consumer satisfaction. In 2014, the legislature asked why the CBA received substantially different responses from those who took the DCA Consumer Satisfaction Survey and the CBA Stakeholder Satisfaction Survey. The legislature also asked about the efforts the CBA is taking to improve its customer service. In the 2018 proposed response, staff discussed the differences between those two surveys and CBA's efforts to increase engagement on those surveys. Are there any questions or comments on this issue?
Jose?
Is there any benefit, is there anything we can do to work with DCA to improve the effectiveness of their survey? And should that be incorporated into a response, or is that we've tried it and it hasn't worked?
The Department of Consumer Affairs, theirs is the same for all the boards. I think what would be more effective and what we just launched is interaction with NASBA. We're going to actually work with their communication team, come up with a communication plan, better survey, outreach, and then I think once we get that, we can offer it then to DCA, and perhaps they will incorporate that, but we're actually going to just really enhance our outreach on our own with
Because you
NASBA.
can control it. But you're always going to have this question, well, why is your result so different from what they do versus what you do, right? And so it won't make this question go away. And that's why I was just thinking, is there any, I guess we can share the results of what we're doing and say, we're going to go do this, but, and I would take some credit for that interaction with DCA as opposed to just doing your own thing.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Item number?
Number 6, new issues. At this point in the drafting of this item, staff have identified the topic of staffing as one issue to report to the legislature. In this item, we propose stating that to help ensure the CBA has sufficient resources to meet its consumer protection mission, that the CBA will be pursuing additional staffing resources. Are there any questions or comments about the content in this item?
So this is not a question that we're already gleaning coming from the legislature or their staffs. This is something we're sensing as something we would update proactively to the legislature. Okay.
All right. Yes.
Will this, Aaron, would this be correlated in some way with the budget process? This proposal, this is a sunset review, and this item at least translates into the budget. So I assume that link is
I think Ms. Pierce had a comment.
There's a separate process that we'll be going through to actually request positions, the budget change proposal process. This is more just to put the issue out there to alert the legislature kind of what our efforts are, and that we have opportunities with getting new staff to continue to improve our services to our consumers. So this does could potentially grease the tracks, if you will.
grease the truck. Okay.
Yeah, kind of grease the tracks, if you will, and kind of let them know what our efforts are. But there's a whole separate process that we would go through to actually request the staff.
Okay, that was the essence of my question, because the actual approval of increased staffing, I think, is the budget.
Yes.
This wouldn't do what you are asking, in other words.
Right, there's a series of steps that would have to go through and then ultimately be approved in the governor's budget.
Thank you. Yes.
Question, are there other issues or topics that are new that we're considering for exploration for this year? I see that you have the staffing being one. Are there other ones that you're researching right now?
Well, that was part of the purpose of this presentation, to solicit input from the members.
So and the reason I ask is we've been coming across a lot of the research and perspective from the report from the Hoover Commission. Is there anything there that we need to start preparing for that might impact sunset reviews for boards? And I'm just brainstorming out loud.
We can certainly go back in and take another look at that report and see if there's any topics and bring that back to the board at the next meeting.
If memory serves, I do think the thrust of much of the comment that was made in the Little Hoover Commission report was focused more on the vocational side rather than the professional licensing entities like the CBA and medical board and dental board. And a lot of the comments, I think, were particularly relevant to some of the other boards, pest control operators, contractor state license board, that sort of thing.
Two thoughts on this particular topic and our response, I guess. One is the technology or lack of advanced technology that we have in this area, right? And how that impacts your staffing equation. And I guess the flip side of that would be just to be able to provide context, right? Once something is executed and implemented, there might be opportunities to streamline and, could have a reduced impact in terms of the number of positions required to do certain things, right? So that might be one thing to incorporate in here, since any movement on our technology is probably some time away, right? And the second piece, and one that I clearly, we get the reports on enforcement resources, licensing resources. The administrative bucket, I probably have less of a mindset of what that represents, and it might be I don't know that it's so much of a response impact, but it might be helpful for us to understand how do we think about that population of positions relative to all the other things that you're trying to request for in here.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right.
That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Next item is a discussion of possible adoption of proposed 2019 meeting dates.
Right, agenda item 1G provides members with a list of the proposed 2019 meeting dates and locations. CBA staff have selected the meeting dates to avoid major and religious holidays. For your reference, attached is the 2019 calendar, which reflects the proposed dates. The CBA may choose to make a motion to adopt or modify the proposed meeting dates and locations. And at this time, I would like to turn it back over to President Savoy, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any comments or questions? Can I get a motion to adopt these dates?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any more discussion, public comment regarding these dates?
I have a question.
Sure.
The November dates proposed for 2019, is that Thanksgiving?
Is that the week before?
That's, I believe, a week before Thanksgiving.
Usually is the week before Thanksgiving.
You'll be eating turkey at the board meeting.
Well, I'm looking at the calendar for November, and it's on that fourth week of Thanksgiving, or of November, sorry.
So Thanksgiving is on November 28th, and we observe it November 28th and 29th.
Got it, thank you.
All right. Call for the vote, please.
Okay. Kathleen Wright,
Yes.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
George Family,
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes.
And Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Item H, no report. We're going to jump to item I, which is the Department of Consumer Affairs. Ms. Karen Nelson, Assistant Deputy Director, Board and Bureau Services, was appointed in October 2017. She's been Chief Operations Officer of the American Leadership Forum Mountain Valley Chapter since 2014, where she also served as Director of Programs and Business Administration from 2011 to 2013. She was the Director of the Youth and Community Engagement at Pro Youth and Families in 2014. She held several positions in the Sacramento Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. And I can go on, but if there's anything you'd like to say about your background, otherwise, welcome to our board meeting.
Well, thank you, and I was going to say good morning, but I believe it's afternoon now. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide an update, and not needed to read all that bio, but appreciate you going over that. So most of my, as a very brief bio, not necessarily going into titles or anything like that, but most of my career has been in the nonprofit world, in various positions with stakeholder engagement, board member engagement, strategic planning, process improvements, just to name a few. And so, as you mentioned, I started in October, and the past 5 months, I'll call it, has been quite fascinating and learning about all of our different boards, As many of you know, I am in charge of the non-healing arts boards, and so I will be seeing you, most of you, in your upcoming board meetings. But wanted to just do a brief update from the department. I know I'm probably between lunch, so I will do my update very quickly. The first thing I'd like to provide an update on is a staffing change. We have welcomed a new Deputy Director of Legislative Affairs. So on March 12th, we welcomed Dennis Cuevas Romero, who was previously Government Relations Director at the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association in Sacramento since 2016. He was Legislative Associate at the Hernandez Strategy Group from 2013 to 2016, and a postgraduate law clerk at the Sacramento Regional Fair Housing Commission in 2012. He does plan to reach out to all of our different boards and bureaus at DCA, and so please do expect a phone call from him so that he can formally introduce himself and figure out how he can best partner with you in any future things you may want to engage with. A couple of different calendar items. So this past, actually yesterday, we had our board member orientation training. I believe Member Nicholson, you were there at the last one in November, and I'm trying to scan the room to determine whether or not there's any others who may want to go and enjoy that training one more time, but the next one will be June 6th. Earlier this March, we had the graduation for an inaugural cohort for our Future Leadership Development Program. So 12 of those individuals completed the 8-month leadership program, participating in various leadership exercises, mentoring with other executive EOs, and also coming up with actually some team projects that were quite fascinating. A couple of different things that are new. One is the board member and executive boot camp that our solid team is going to be offering. So for additional training, team building, specifically geared to board members, executive officers, committee members, and bureau staff. And it's designed to improve interaction and facilitate cohesiveness with the group. And it provides a safe environment for communication and build positive relationships and give you some more tools in your toolbox and your toolkits. So some of the things that they're customizing are topics from conflict styles, true colors, going from good to great, leadership styles, working with difficult people, and just to name a few. And so if you are interested in any of that, feel free to contact our solid team. They're able to customize it to what your needs will be. And the last thing that I will provide an update on is our licensing and enforcement work group. This is part of the DCA strategic plan. And so we are going to partner with our boards and bureaus along with their key staff and their licensing and enforcement divisions to really look at best practices and be able to share that knowledge with the different boards and bureaus. You know, why reinvent the wheel when there may be someone else of our boards and bureaus that are currently doing something new and innovative. So our hope is that work group and that body of people will help strengthen our processes in the licensing and enforcement realm. And that, I believe, concludes the DCA update for the moment. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me.
Before we break for lunch, I want to indulge a few more minutes. I want to bring forth an agenda item number 7A1, a report from the EAC, Mr. Rosenbaum, for a time issue. So, welcome.
Thank you very much for that indulgence. Good afternoon. The Enforcement Committee had its last meeting on February 1st in Sacramento. At that meeting, we had our members review and provide guidance on 12 of the open enforcement cases, and we also reviewed 15 of the closed cases. We also held 2 investigative hearings. Our next meeting will be held on May 3rd in Irvine. That concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Certainly better late than never. Any questions? Thank you so much for being here. With that, we break for lunch. Time certain, 1:15. Please be here a few minutes before. 1:30. 1:30. I'd like to call the meeting back to order after lunch. I'd just like to make one quick announcement to the board members. Just a reminder that we have a board dinner this evening at Pistango. If you've not RSVP, just let Rebecca know when we break. Okay, time certain, 1:30.
Okay.
Turn it over to the judge.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to be hearing 3 different matters this afternoon. Everything's going to be taken down by a court reporter, so I caution everybody to speak one at a time and speak slowly. And if you're going to read something, make sure you speak super slowly so the court reporter can take it down. Okay, the first matter that we are here is in the petition for reinstatement filed by Masood Ahmed Chatani. The OAH case number is 2017120235. Today's date is March 22nd, 2018. The time is approximately 1:30 in the afternoon. My name is Cindy Foreman, and I'm an administrative law judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings assigned to sit with the California Board of Accountancy, which is convened here today to consider this petition. May I take the appearances for the record, beginning with the Attorney General's office?
Yes, good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the board. Deputy Attorney General Carl Sani, appearing pursuant to Business and Professions Code Section 5115, and representing the people of the state of California in this petition.
Good afternoon.
John Cradell for the respondent, Masood Kotani.
And good afternoon, Mr. Katari, you're present here today?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Mr. Sane, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I would first like to mark for identification and offer into evidence as Exhibit 1 the February 8th, 2018 memo from Mr. Franzella forwarding the original petition packet with accompanying documents that have been marked NAC-PET001 to, I believe, 0099. That exhibit contains the petition with attachments, which are found at pages 5 to 77, the underlying accusation, which is found at pages PET 79 to 84, the 2014 decision and order on the accusation, which is found at PET 85 to 93, and then it also includes the decision and order on Mr. Chotani's 2016 petition for reinstatement, which the board issued, and which is found at PET 94 to 96. And then it concludes with the license history, which is at the very end at 97 to 99. The board members and the petitioner and his counsel have been provided with a copy of the same set of exhibits. The documents number 99 pages, which I'll refer to as PET with the number, the page number. This matter, if I can just give a quick summary, Your Honor, involves Mr. Chotani, who received his certificate number 65903 on January 28, 1994, found in the license history. His license was revoked by the CBA effective February 28, 2014. In 2016, Mr. Chotani appeared before the board petitioning for reinstatement. His license was denied on the grounds specified in the board's order. The underlying discipline arose from a respondent's plea of guilty to felony conspiracy to defraud the United States through tax fraud. The facts and circumstances are summarized in Mr. Franzella's memo at page PET 2 and are more fully described at pages 15 to 22, which contain the CBA's decision following an administrative hearing where Mr. Chotani appeared by telephone. And attached to respondent's petition are continuing education worksheets. He's also submitted CE documentation, plus letters that he has submitted from various references, and he has also submitted a letter indicating that he's been admitted to Cal State Northridge Master of Tax program, which I think is found at page PET 69. The CBA's 2016 order denying reinstatement was effective October 24th, 2016. His decision was based on several considerations, including that there had been insufficient passage of time given the severity of the underlying event. Mr. Chotani states that he has fully repaid the CBA for its cost of enforcement ordered in his decision on its accusation. So at this time, Your Honor, I would request that the witness be sworn in, and then Mr. Chotani's counsel can be given an opportunity to question his client.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chotani, can you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury? I do. Okay, thank you. Please sit down. Okay, Mr. Credell, how do you want to handle this? Do you want to ask your client questions, or what?
Yeah, I was just going to give a brief opening statement, Your Honor, and then ask him some questions.
Okay. Oh, wait, before we start, I just want to make sure I've marked the petition package described by Mr. Sone, which is MAC PET 001 to 099 as Exhibit A, and Exhibit A will be admitted into evidence for jurisdictional purposes.
Thank you.
Just for consistency of the record, can we number Exhibit 1?
Yes.
That's how I offered it, and just for...
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So for Exhibit 1, I stand corrected. Okay. Mr. Credell?
Thank you, Your Honor. In the first decision, and I'll be brief on this recap, because the state has pretty much gone over a little bit of the history of it. But the first decision in February of 2014, the board denied the request, basically saying that there was insufficient evidence of rehabilitation. The respondent was ordered to pay $5,262.50 in investigation costs. At the hearing itself, which took place in 2014, which was approximately 1 year after Mr. Katani had been convicted in the federal court, and the hearing was conducted basically on Mr. Katani's part telephonically from federal prison. He denied that he was a willing participant in the conspiracy for which he was convicted. We would attribute some of that testimony to being under considerable stress as he was incarcerated and basically was giving his testimony in a room under guard. Aside from the insufficient evidence of rehabilitation, the letters that were submitted did not show, the letters and recommendation did not show that the letter writers had knowledge of Mr. Katani's conviction. There was also, the board cited insufficient passage of time, and the evidence submitted of the continuing education, or just the education, was unrelated to licensure, and it was apparently by family members, and the work letters had little or offered little insight for the board into Mr. Katani's current work ethics. At the second hearing in 2016, again, the decision of the board in citing the denial, the board cited insufficient passage of time since the conviction. Again, indicated that the board was dissatisfied with Mr. Katani's seeming minimization of his misconduct, and the education that Mr. Katani had submitted was not related to licensure. And here we are at the third hearing, and I'd like to ask Mr. Katani some questions related to those related to some of those concerns of the board, if I may. Mr. Katani, what are the fines that you were ordered to pay by this board at the 2014 decision?
The investigative costs were about $5,262, and I've paid that off in full.
Okay. Have you submitted documentation to the board that you paid that off in full?
They have a record of that, and they actually have acknowledged that in the documents submitted to the board members.
All right, and go backward a little bit. What are the terms of your release from federal prison?
Basically, I was on probation for like 12 months, and the terms included not practicing any income taxes, et cetera, or not doing the accounting for like 12 months. And I fully complied with those provisions that they had.
All right, and were those documents that were produced by the Justice Department?
That's correct.
All right, did you produce those documents from the Justice Department for the Board of Accountancy?
They do have that, yes.
All right, as part of the federal, the deal that you made with U.S. attorneys, federal prosecutors, were you ordered to make restitution?
Yes, my restitution was in the high 60s, and I brought it down to like $47,000. And in the new evidence that I've submitted, I have the latest statement, which is petition 0291-1, that shows my monthly payments that I make based on the agreement that I have with the Department of Justice. All the payments are being made on a timely basis, and the balance remaining on that is $47,000.
All right, and you've also submitted that to the board?
Yeah, this is actually in the evidence that we submitted today.
Okay. All right, and those are the packets that were distributed to the board members today?
That's correct.
Since the time that you were released from prison in 2014, were you released in 2014?
That's correct, yes.
All right. And did you begin to work right away after that?
Yes, I did.
All right. Since that time, have you had any further incidents of bad behavior in your profession?
No, I have not.
Okay. You stated that you've worked since you were released in 2013. Who have you worked for since the board's last decision in 2016?
It's the same employer. Mr. Mohammed Poonamdari was one of my clients. I've known him since like 1994. And he owns several hotels in the Los Angeles area. So I actually am part of the operations for one of the hotels. I also help him with other financial matters as well.
Okay. With each of the positions that you're going to describe for us, were you, let's start with Mr. Poonamdari, were you honest with him about your history concerning the 2013 conviction?
Yes, I was actually, yes.
What did you tell him?
I told him exactly what I had done, and I expressed my remorse. And then he actually offered to give me a second chance, and he hired me. And in fact, there is a letter actually that one of his letters is in the package, which describes my responsibilities, and specifically my responsibility in depositing and accounting for the high volume of cash that he has in those hotels.
Okay, and we'll get to those letters. Now, was he the first person that you worked for after you were released from federal prison in 2014?
Yes, I was, yes.
Okay. Have you worked for anybody else since then?
No, I haven't.
Okay. And have your job duties remained the same?
The job duties have actually increased. As he gained trust in me, he gave me more financial matters to deal with in terms of accounting, et cetera, helping him with other hotels' financial matters also.
Okay. And have you previously submitted to the board some letters of recommendation from certain people, and that would include Mr. Poonamdari?
Poonamdari, his letters in that, the 6 letters that I've submitted, one of the letters is from Mr. Poonamdari, and he specifically talks about the high volume of cash and basically my accounting of every single penny that has gone through the hotels, which I believe was more than $500,000 and no losses at all.
Okay. And the letters that you first submitted to the board, I believe, were in 2017, is that correct?
The letters that I submitted to the board were dated July 2017 because this meeting was supposed to be held in October, and I guess they changed the dates. But I do have updated letters. I mean, it's the same letters, but they've updated the dates for me.
All right.
The authors.
And, Your Honor, we do have those updated letters. I believed,
It's the same letters that they have, it's just that
All right.
the prior ones were dated July of 2017.
yeah, so, Your Honor, we do have current letters that have been redated and re-signed by the same people that have submitted these letters of recommendation. And who are these letters of recommendation from?
So the first one is from Mr. Mohammed Poonamdari. He's the proprietor of a whole bunch of hotels.
Can you spell the last name for the court reporter,
It's
please?
P as in Paul, O-U-R-N-A-M-D-A-R-I, Poonamdari.
Thank you.
And can you go through a couple of these letters for the board? And because they already have the ones from 2017 are identical to the ones that we're talking about today. And describe for them in a couple of these letters how they address the board's concern about your work ethics.
So for example, in Mr. Poonamdari's letter, he states that in the second paragraph, he has, talking about me, he has handled all guest payments honestly and responsibly and has accounted for the large cash volume that the hotel sees down to the last penny. I have failed to see any discrepancies in cash and other deposits in the 3 years since he took over. I was so impressed with his work that I've hired him to do accountancy consulting work for all the other properties and act as a liaison with our routine franchisor and city occupancy tax audits, etc. That's one of the letters. And then I have two other letters from colleagues, work colleagues. I'd like to look at Ian Lopilato's letter. He's one of the assistant managers at the hotel. And in the third paragraph, Ian specifically addresses the issue of confidentiality, where he says that in the hospitality industry, we are presented with more sensitive information about our customers than in most other lines of work. Billing addresses and credit card information are required at check-in, with many of our guests opting to receive mail. We handle guests' bank statements and numerous other personal documents on a weekly, if not daily basis. Masood has proven time and again that he can be trusted with confidential information.
Okay. Give us just a brief example of how you handle your, what is the confidential customer information that you receive and how do you handle it?
Sure, so basically, we receive, credit card information on a daily basis. Clients pay with credit cards. They also receive, at times, they have extended stay guests, and they receive personal items which include, credit cards that they've applied for, their bank statements, checks, payments, etc. I have a lockbox. Basically, when I receive all that information, I lock that up. I only have the combination to that, and I ensure the safety and the privacy of that information.
Is there, do you keep that information after it's done, or what do you do with it?
Well, basically, the clients collect that information. We actually are responsible for holding it on a temporary basis. At times, the guest leaves, they would call us. I put that in a safe. In almost 99% of the cases, if they have left the hotel, they would call us and they asked us to forward that mail, bank statements or credit cards, etc., to the new location.
And you forward that information?
Yes.
And can you give another sort of brief explanation of your duties with respect to handling the cash in the business? How does it come in? Where does it stay? What do you do with it?
Sure. These hotels basically receive a large volume of cash. At times, it's in excess of $40,000 to $50,000 a month. We basically make sure that each shift basically accounts for the cash. Once the shift ends, the second person who takes the shift over counts the cash, initials the envelope, and drops the envelope in the safe. I'm responsible, basically, I'm the only one who knows the safe combinations. We open the safe, account for all the cash, and I deposit the cash at least twice a week. And then what I do is I prepare a cash report, and we forward that to the owner's office.
Okay. And so are we talking about handling cash for several hotels or just one hotel? How many hotels?
It's just one hotel that I handle, but I also review cash deposit receipts, et cetera, and other financial, kind of an internal audit that he asked me to do, perform that for the Holiday Inn that he owns, or the Hamptons, et cetera, or the La Quinta Inn. So I also do that for the hotels.
So you performed that internal audit?
I perform like an internal audit for them also, yes.
What was the reason for doing that internal audit?
Because at one of the other hotels, they actually lost a whole bunch of money, which was unaccounted for. So I advised them basically, we installed security systems in our hotel and also the other hotels also. And also I advised them in terms of like preparation of like specific types of reports, and also to delegate these responsibilities to different individuals, because they had the same person, for example, collecting the cash, depositing the cash, and also preparing the reports.
Okay. And a sort of a brief explanation with respect to your duties with customer care.
Yeah, so that's one of our top priorities. I do a lot of training for that also. So for example, if you look at one of the work colleagues, Derek DeFoya, he actually gave me a letter. The last line on the last, I guess, the 3 lines on the first page, he says that I cannot tell you how often this happens. I'm sorry, yeah. One example that I feel shows Masood's good nature is when guests leave behind personal items in their rooms. I cannot tell you how often this happens, and I've worked with many managers who care less about this, because it ends up being a lot of extra work packaging the items, creating shipping labels, and sending them out to the proper locations. It ends up being a relatively thankless job. It doesn't improve any scores, and no one is getting a bonus. At the end of the day, it is just an act of kindness, because oftentimes these items left behind have no monetary value, just sentimental. Masood would always go above and beyond to make sure the guests receive their lost items in a timely fashion, oftentimes hand-delivering them to UPS or FedEx on his own time.
Okay. Now, switching gears a little bit, since the 2014 and the last 2016 decision, have you continued your education?
Yes, I have. So I submitted 80.5 hours with the package that I sent to the board. Above and beyond that, from September of 2017 through February of 2018, I've just introduced new evidence of another 125 hours that I've taken. I was accepted into the MS in Taxation program at Cal State Northridge. I began my first semester in October of 2017.
Do you have your grade?
I presented my transcript from my first semester, which I've highlighted. So we took, in the first semester, I took tax ethics and also income tax applications. As you can see, I have a 4.0 GPA. And then on the second page are my current classes that I'm enrolled in, federal tax procedure and taxation of corporations. This session is going to end, they stopped that for the tax season. This session is going to end on May 19th. So I'll be done with 2 semesters of my MS in Taxation program.
One of the concerns that the board has had at the last 2 hearings, as I stated in the opening statement, was that you were not sufficiently remorseful for your misconduct. In 2014, when you were doing the interview from federal prison, you were saying that you were a reluctant or forced participant in the conspiracy to defraud the government, federal government. And then in the 2016 hearing, you had said that you had committed a grievous error, and the board remained concerned that you were not sufficiently remorseful. And I was curious if you had some time to reflect on that concern and if there's anything you want to tell the board about the degree of your remorse, what you're doing, anything that you're doing to make amends for that, if you would.
Yeah, I've done a lot of soul searching. I'm ashamed that I've betrayed my profession, I've betrayed my clients, and I've betrayed my family. I'm extremely remorseful for my criminal actions. Those actions will not be repeated again. I wish I could go back and change that, but reflecting upon that, those were serious criminal actions, never to be repeated again.
All right. And I think one of the things that you were asked at the last hearing was that if you were to get your license back, how would you utilize that license?
If I would get my license back, I promised the board that I would move forward with honesty, full compliance, and protecting the confidentiality and privacy of the clients.
No more questions.
Thank you. Sonny, do you want to start, or should I ask the board?
Why don't I can start, Your Honor. Is it pronounced Chotani?
Chotani.
Chotani, okay. Mr. Chotani, on this timeline that you've given, you were convicted in January 2013, is that correct?
I think it was 2012.
And you were released from prison in August of 2014?
2014, yes.
And at that point, you got the current job that you have, correct?
That's correct.
And you were precluded for the first year after your incarceration ended from preparing tax returns and utilizing licenses, professional licenses.
That's correct.
So then you filed a petition for reinstatement in 2016, about a year later. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
So at one of the earliest points in time that you can file your petition for reinstatement, correct? And after that was denied, roughly 18 months have passed, and you're here before the board again, correct?
Yes, I am.
Now, one of the stated concerns of the board was that insufficient time had passed to evaluate rehabilitation in view of the severity of your crimes. Why do you believe that now sufficient time has passed for the board to grant your petition?
The reason why I said that is because these actions that led to the conviction, first of all, go back to the year 2002, almost 16 years ago. Although the conviction took place in 2012, I had reflected upon my actions going back to 2002, and since then, understanding the severity of my actions and what I had done, I've moved forward honestly for the past 16 years, and that's why I feel that 16 years have gone by since those acts took place, and therefore sufficient time has gone by.
Now, you've submitted a letter of reference from Mr. Mohammed Ornadari, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's found at page PET 70. You indicated that he was a former client of yours, correct?
That's correct.
And you serviced him as a tax consultant from 1994 to 2011, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you prepare his tax returns, either his personal or his corporate returns?
Yes, I used to prepare his corporate and personal taxes prior to that, 2011.
Do you know if any of the tax returns that you prepared at that time were subject to the criminal allegations that were made?
No, they were not. None of those, no.
Okay, you have to let the attorney finish his question before you answer.
So they were not the subject of the criminal indictment?
No, they were not.
Now, you indicate in your petition that you received, subsequent to the CBA's revocation, disciplined by the IRS. I believe that's on page PET 6 in box 1. Did you bring a copy of the IRS suspension?
No, that basically was brought up at the last hearing. That is in there. If you look at the judgment and decision in 2016, because that went hand in hand, basically, this revocation and the suspension from the IRS. And I did bring that up at the last hearing, and that is in those documents.
Okay, at the last hearing, pretty much all of the letters of reference that you have this time were letters that you submitted at the last hearing, is that correct?
No, they're not. There are some additional letters.
What are the additional ones?
The additional letters are from my work colleagues specifically, because I did discuss my conviction with them, and I wanted them to honestly bring out my work ethics in those letters, which they have. So I have Ian Alopelato and Derek Tafoya. Those are, one of them is an assistant manager, the other one is a customer service gentleman. So I asked them specifically to bring those out. So those are additional letters.
Those are the two additional
Two
letters.
additional letters that I have.
Now, in your petition, you also indicate that if your license is reinstated, that you intend to practice in accounting and auditing, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Can you explain to the board, if you're interested in auditing and accounting, why you're going through this Masters of Tax program?
Because it's always useful, because my goal in the future is to get myself reinstated. Once the board grants me permission to practice, I will also apply or petition the Office of Professional Responsibility with the IRS also. So that's also a future plan.
Now, if you look at page PET 11, at paragraph 4, you say, I acknowledge that at the hearing that I did not accept responsibility for my criminal actions fully. I believe at that time you're referring to the original hearing on the accusation back in 2014.
2014, yes.
And that was the hearing at which you were incarcerated and your testimony was offered via telephone, correct?
That's correct.
And your attorney said that you were stressed out, and that's the reason why you said what you said, is that correct?
Like I said, I've always been remorseful. I mean, that's how basically it was interpreted. Because we had like 2 guards standing in the room basically, and there was a limitation in terms of how much he could talk on the phone.
Well, you acknowledged that in the 2014 hearing you denied responsibility for engaging in criminal conduct, correct?
I'm extremely remorseful. I want to bring it back to my original statement that I made at the beginning of this hearing, that I'm remorseful. I've done a lot of soul searching, and I take full responsibility for my actions.
I understand that. That's your current statement. My question is, back in 2014, when you testified to the board, at that point, you denied responsibility for engaging in criminal conduct.
Mr. Sani, we brought this up at the last hearing also, so I don't think there's any point in actually repeating that, because we discussed it at the last hearing. Yeah, it did come out like that, but like I said, I'm extremely remorseful for my actions.
I understand that you're extremely remorseful, you said that. So back in 2014, when your license was at issue, you denied responsibility for the criminal actions. And then at that point, you were testifying on the telephone under oath, correct?
Yes, I was.
So even though you were under oath, you were telling the board something which you now admit was false, correct?
Yes.
Then in 2016, when you testified at the last petition hearing, you minimized your wrongdoing, not accepting full responsibility. Is that correct?
I did not. I accepted my responsibility, but some of the vocabulary that I might have used showed that I might have minimized the severity of my actions.
Okay, and then today, having read the board's 2016 decision, you are making statements that you are remorseful and that you extremely regret what you did, correct?
Yes, I am.
Well, my question is, can you explain to the board whether or not they should take your current words to be truly remorseful or simply a recitation of what you think the board wants to hear?
No, it isn't. It's, in all honesty, I've done a lot of soul searching, and this is exactly what it is. I express remorse. I regret my actions, and I apologize to the board for what I've done.
No further questions this time.
Okay, Ms. Wright?
Thank you. Mr. Chatani, you've indicated, I think, I just want to be sure I have this straight, that you are planning going forward to engage in accounting and attest services. Do you also plan to offer tax services?
Not at the present time. I actually like auditing and attestation more than taxation. This degree that I'm taking actually also helps me in that also, and also I would like to teach in the future also, so the teaching would actually go hand in hand with a master's degree in taxation.
Okay, and you do plan to petition the IRS for reinstatement after you get your CPA license from this board? Is that the progression?
That's what my plan would be, yes.
Okay. My last question then is whether you go into tax or you go into accounting or attest services, all of these professions are, I guess some could say, encumbered with a number of rules and regulations that are fairly strict, oftentimes in the context of applying them to a particular client, seemingly unfair. How would you handle that situation? I mean, you have a rule or a regulation which says this item is not, I'm a tax person, so
Sure.
I tend to refer to tax. This item is not deductible, or this income is includable, and it's ordinary income and not capital gain, and so forth and so on. Yet with your client scenario, the facts are a little gray. So how would you approach this kind of a situation?
That's a very good question, actually. That one of the classes that we just finished, tax ethics, goes over that in terms of, those gray areas. One of my goals going forward would be actually to look for quality clients. Clients who actually are going to follow, because these rules are getting stricter.
Yes.
Circular 230, the AICPA rules, the Board of Accountancy rules, et cetera. I want to actually follow all these rules and only basically be able to develop my practice with those types of quality clients who fit into that mold.
And how do you perceive the process of research? Because there are so many rules and regulations, and you get a question, you're a little unsure of the answer. Would you just go forward with what your best guess is, or would you take the time to actually analyze and research the situation presented?
One of the things that I learned from this the tax research class, obviously, is that you need to get all the facts. If you don't have enough facts, obviously, you need to get more facts, apply the law in terms of the substantive authority, the code, or the regs. So that's basically how I would do my research.
And if that's not what your client wants to do, you would go with the rule of law, so to speak?
Yes, I would.
Okay, no further questions?
Thank you. Ms. Leon?
No questions.
Mr. Campos?
No questions.
Mr. Jacobson?
Sir, I think that you said that you have been doing some accountancy consulting work for the hotel, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
What type of accountancy consulting work have you
Okay, so the hotel, there are about 9 hotels. We do have a centralized bookkeeping office. We have 2 bookkeepers. So basically, I handle payroll for like 3 of the hotels, and also the bookkeepers send me the monthly general ledgers and the QuickBook files, et cetera, on a monthly basis. So I prepare like financial statements for them. I meet with the owners and then go over the financial statements. And basically, it's a checks and balance kind of a system that we've implemented. So I do kind of an internal audit also for them.
Thank you.
Ms. Salazar?
Thank you. The question I have is also about the letter of recommendation for Mr. Mohammed Kornamdari. In reference to the accounting and tax consultant work that you did, it spans a length of time from 1994 to 2011. Were you doing those remotely during part of that time? I see you were employed out of the country.
So basically, because I've given you the length of time, but a couple of years I was not doing it. So that part of it, the period, I did not provide those services for you.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. No more questions.
Okay, Ms. Berha?
I have no questions.
Mr. Silverman?
No questions.
Mr. Farmer?
No questions.
Mr. Savoy?
No question.
Ms. Nicholson?
No question.
Ms. Molina Lopez?
Thank you. Yes, I do have a question. In reference to PET 011 was the page number of the packet. The last paragraph on there, you reference your associate's degree in Spanish.
Yes.
And then you go on to state that you feel this will enable you to provide services to a wider range of clients.
That's correct.
Can you expand for me what your expectation is?
Sure. So one of the things at the last hearing was because I was in the middle of completing my degree in Spanish, that was not counted actually by the board. But I think that's a very useful degree for me because as part of the Cal State Northridge taxation program, we also have a low-income tax clinic that we help, taxpayers in need of assistance. And 70 to 80% of them speak Spanish. That actually has become very useful. Although my Spanish is not fluent, but I can read and write fluently in Spanish. And I think that is actually a very, very useful tool for me to be able to help that community in terms of giving educational workshops, helping them understand the tax system, etc.
The clientele population is mostly in Northridge, is that what you're telling me?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
May I ask one further question? I'm sorry.
sure.
Thank you. Do you participate in VITA?
No, I don't. Actually, because this degree, actually, I was enrolled in this degree when I got into these problems. This is like a second time around. I'm actually part of the Tax Development Journal, in which you publish, Cal State Northridge has a tax development journal under Professor Gianni. I'm actually writing an article, which will be published in a couple of months. So she's actually editing the specific article. So I'm not part of that, but I'm actually writing this time.
Any other questions from the board? No? Mr. Sane, do you have any additional questions?
Well, not so much a question, Your Honor, but I think we've had reference made now to 2 or 3 documents.
Yes,
which probably ought to be
yes, I know
entered.
we're gonna do that. I'm just gonna, I
Okay.
just want to make sure. Okay, and Mr. Cordell, do you have any additional questions before
No,
we
Your
mark? Okay, so we should go through the documents that you want to mark into, introduce into evidence. Some of the documents have been provided to the board members already.
Yeah, and that would be the document number MAC PET 0321 binder.
Great, I have a document, the first document I have is a statement from the U.S. Department of Justice. It's PET 029-1.
Yeah, that's correct, Your Honor.
Okay,
We
so,
requested that be admitted.
okay, so I'm going to mark it as Exhibit A, because it's the respondent's exhibit, and the petitioner's exhibit. And, Mr. Sani, do you have any objection to Exhibit A coming into evidence?
None.
Okay, so Exhibit A will be admitted into evidence. The next document I have doesn't have a number at the bottom. Oh, it has a number on the top, which is PET 069-1.
That's correct, Your Honor.
And do you want to just tell us what this is?
This is my unofficial transcript from Cal State Northridge. The first page has my grades from the first semester, and the second page includes the classes that I'm currently enrolled in.
Okay, I am marking this exhibit, which is 2 pages long, which is the unofficial transcript, as Exhibit B. Mr. Sani, do you have any objection to Exhibit B coming into evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so Exhibit B will be admitted into evidence. The third document I have is a document titled on top MACPT 032-1, and it contains a number of certificates that are not marked. Do you want to tell me what this document is?
These are additional continuing education classes that I've taken from September of 2017 all the way through February of 2018. It's about 125 hours of continuing education, above and beyond the 80 hours that I submitted to the board. I also attached the certificates. I guess I forgot to put the exhibit numbers on the certificates.
Okay, well, that's okay. It's all attached in a packet. Mr. Sonny, do you have any objection? I've marked as Exhibit C, it looks like a spreadsheet entitled Continuing Education Reporting Worksheet. Again, it's Bates numbered PE2032-1, and enclosed with that spreadsheet is a number of certificates. Mr. Sonny, do you have any objection to Exhibit C coming into evidence?
None, Your Honor.
Okay, so Exhibit C will be admitted into evidence. Now, Mr. Cordell, you also mentioned that you had some letters. Do you want to introduce those, or?
Yes, Your Honor. They are, they're updated letters from the letters that have been previously submitted to the board.
Well, the contents haven't changed, but the dates and the signatures, you've updated the dates for me. If the board feels that the original letters that I've submitted with the July 17, 2017 dates are fine.
Okay, and have those been re-signed?
Yes, re-signed and redated.
I'm happy either way, Your Honor, or we can stipulate on the record that these are the same letters with updated dates, just not to clutter up the record, but
That would make-
whatever the respondent wants to do.
That would be fine.
Okay, so I think I still need a copy of that one, at least one of those letters. I don't know if the board members need additional copies. Does anyone need an additional copy? No, but I'd like an additional copy. So
All right,
can
I'm
you
sorry, I
just-
didn't hear the last thing you
I'd
said.
like a copy of those updated
Oh,
letters, just
all
one.
right, Your Honor.
I just need one.
All right, you want it right now?
Yeah, please.
All right.
Thank you. So I'm going to mark as Exhibit D, and I'm just going to do it as one exhibit, updated letters from, that have already been submitted, the contents of which have already been submitted to the board. There's 1, 2, 6 letters. Mr. Sonny, do you have any objection to, I've marked it as Exhibit D, Exhibit D coming into evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so Exhibit D is admitted into evidence. Is there anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Are there any other questions from the board? Mr. Sonny?
None.
Is there a closing argument at all?
Just briefly, Your Honor. We believe that the board's concerns from the last two decisions seem to have been addressed. It's been a year and a half since the last decision in September of 2016. It's been approximately 15 years since the bad acts themselves. Since that time, there have been no further incidents. The letters of recommendation and the documents seem to indicate good performance of work ethics and that cash has been handled. Customers' personal items have been handled. Confidential information has been appropriately handled. And Mr. Chitani seems to have reformed his behavior sufficiently. The recommendation letters this time are in relation to being a certified public accountant, and the writers of those letters indicate that they were aware of the conviction, and Mr. Chitani has testified that he fully informed his employers of the conviction. Also, unlike last time, the education that has been completed is related to licensure. Also, we don't know what the decision of the board is going to be, but we'd also, if the board is inclined to reinstate the license, of course, we would be happy with that. We'd also like the court to take notice of the Business and Profession Code. It gives the board to place restrictions on petitioners' scope of professional practice in the alternative to a complete denial. Thank you.
Mr. Sonny, do you have anything?
Just briefly, in any proceeding such as a petition for reinstatement, it's the board's obligation to weigh the factors in favor of reinstatement and the factors against reinstatement. Mr. Cradell has articulated some of the improvements that have been made in this petition, letters that talk about his work experience, 2 additional letters, and he has perform more continuing education. Those certainly are considerations. The board's, in its 2016 decision, at paragraphs 3 through 6, registered a variety of concerns, which is on the counterbalancing side, a concern regarding the changing nature of his testimony. In all these proceedings, he was under oath, testifying under penalty of perjury about his actions. Initially, the board found that he had denied that he was involved in any conspiracy at paragraph 3 of the board's decision, and testified that he was instead a victim of identity fraud, stalking, and terrorist threats. That changed in the 2016 petition by acknowledging grievous errors, and now in this proceeding he has acknowledged that he engaged in criminal wrongful conduct and is remorseful. And the board needs to evaluate and weigh those statements, whether these are statements heartfelt, which they may be, that's for the board to determine, or whether these are recitations of what the licensee thinks the board wants to hear, and that's for the board to evaluate and weigh. The burden of proof in these proceedings, as I believe is apparent, is that there must be clear and convincing evidence of rehabilitation, and it's particularly focused on the conduct since the underlying conduct, which is, we have a 3.5-year history, which has been some positive issues about that, and we commented on the other negative side. So my job here is not to take a position, but simply to highlight these areas for the board to consider in its discussions. And with that said, Your Honor, I have no further statement.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cradell, do you have anything further?
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The record is closed, and we will proceed to the next matter. Before we do proceed, though, I'm going to go off the record. The court reporter has a transcript request. If you ever need a request for a transcript, she'll have that information. I need to sign it, and then she'll just give it back to you.
All right, thank you, Your Honor.
We're off the record, Your Honor?
Yes, we are. At 2:28. Okay, let's get started. Okay, we're here in the matter of the petition for reinstatement of revoked certificate filed by James Brian Haynes. The OAH case number is 2017-120234. Today's date is March 22nd, 2018. The time is 2:30 p.m. My name is Cindy Foreman. I'm the Administrative Law Judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings assigned to sit with the California Board of Accountancy, which is convened here today to consider this petition. We are hearing this matter in Irvine, California. May I take the appearances for the record, beginning with the Attorney General's office?
Yes, good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the board, Deputy Attorney General Carl Sani, appearing on behalf of the people of the state of California pursuant to Business and Professions Code, Section 5115.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sani.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Jennifer Gatewood from the Corey Law Firm, appearing on behalf of Mr. Jim Haynes, the petitioner.
Good afternoon. And your client is here, right?
Yes, my client is here along with his wife, Michelle Haynes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Sani?
Yes, Your Honor. I would first like to mark for identification and offer into evidence as Exhibit 1 the February 8, 2018 memo forwarding the original petition packet with the accompanying documents, which have been marked JBH-PET-001-2062, I believe. That exhibit contains the petition with attachments at pages 4 to 41, the underlying accusation from over 20 years ago at PET 43 to 51. The decision in order revoking Mr. Haynes' license back in 1998, which is at pages 52 to 59, and the license history for Mr. Haynes, which is the concluding documents at pages PET 60 to 62. The board members and petitioner have been provided with a copy of the same set of this exhibit. The documents total 62 pages, and I will hereafter refer to the documents by referencing PET and the page number. I can offer a brief summary of the case. In fact, I'll try to make it very brief. Mr. Haynes received his certificate, number 54234, on November 17, 1989. That's found at the license history of PET 60. His license was revoked by the CBA effective on March 12, 1998. The underlying discipline arose from respondent's practice as a CPA without a valid license, breach of fiduciary duty in the preparation of tax returns, dishonesty, fraud, and misappropriation of funds, constituting an embezzlement, failure to return client records, and failure to comply with continuing education requirements. The facts and circumstances are summarized in CBA's 1998 decision at PET 53 to 59. Costs were imposed in the amount of $5,106.50, which I believe remain outstanding. Attached to respondent's petition are continuing education worksheet and certificates, I believe, plus reference letters and evaluations from medical professionals regarding mental health issues. And at this time, Your Honor, I would like to address specifically pages PET 40 and 41, Your Honor, because these contain records from a mental health professional. We believe that they're private information and should be put under seal so that they're not available to the public without good cause.
Okay, Ms. Harrington, do you have any, I'm sorry, Ms. Gatewood, do you have any objection to placing those 2 pages under seal? Okay, so page numbers JBH PET 040 and JBH PET 041 shall be placed under seal because they contain confidential medical information about the petitioner.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I believe I may have been in error on the costs. The partial payment of costs? All right. We can deal with that. So at this point, Your Honor, we would request that the witness be sworn in.
Okay, before we do that, I'm just going to, I've marked the exhibit as described, the JBH PET 001 to PET 062 as Exhibit 1. Ms. Gatewood, do you have any objection to Exhibit 1 coming in to evidence?
No objection.
Okay, so Exhibit 1 will be coming into evidence, and with the documents that we mentioned before sealed. Mr. Haynes, can you please rise and I will swear you in? Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, please sit down. Ms. Gatewood?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, members of the board. I guess the thing that stands out to me when I first got this case was the length of time that had passed since Mr. Haynes's license had been revoked. It's been about 20 years. And I think in that time, through his testimony, he'll be able to show what he's done to rehabilitate himself from the circumstances in his personal life that were going on at the time that his license was revoked, and what is different with his life now that would hopefully lead the board to grant this petition for reinstatement. And with that, should I just start into questions? Okay.
You're going to have to speak up a little bit louder.
Okay, sorry, Your Honor.
Or pull the mic closer.
All right. Mr. Haynes, what was going on in your personal life, just briefly, at the time at which your license was revoked back in 1998?
Around that same time, I had gone through a divorce of a relatively embarrassing and short marriage, frankly. And then also, my father had passed away from cancer in about 22 days. And then I'd also, at the time, been a subject of a potential foreclosure of my house. So I was having some very difficult period of time right there.
And having those personal issues going on in your life, would you say that that led you to make some poor choices in your professional life?
Absolutely.
Okay. And have you, since your license was revoked in 1998, have you been employed?
I have.
Okay. And can you summarize briefly what companies you have worked for? Sorry, I should backtrack. Have you been working for companies during that time period?
Yes.
Okay. And can you give us just a summary of where you have worked and the titles that you've had?
I went to, I want to say it was 1999, I think it was. I went to work for a company in San Diego by the name of Affirm Housing Group. They're a Section 42 developer, and we built low-income housing, and I was a CFO for them for 5 years, from 1999 till about around 2004, roughly. I handled all the accounting records, the books and records, the tax returns. I didn't prepare the tax returns, but I reviewed them. I reviewed all the property financial statements, all of the tax credit binders that we had to submit for our tax credits, things of that sort. We had 2 outside CPAs at the time with that firm. One that dealt with the CEO's main tax work for us personally, and then another one for the firm that was specialized in Section 42 developers. From there, after that, I got married, and we moved to Las Vegas. We moved to Henderson. We lived in Henderson, Nevada for about 6 years, 5 years, 6 years. My son was born over there in 2004, and I was a CFO for an architecture and engineering firm in Las Vegas for about 5 years. And then after that, we moved back to California, and I now work for I'm controller for an organization in Costa Mesa.
Okay. And in those roles, I think you described a little bit in the first or the second employer role. Is it fair to say that you're responsible for handling sensitive financial information for your employers?
It is.
And to your knowledge, has there been any complaints or issues or reprimands of any sort about your handling of sensitive financial information?
No, there is not.
Have there been any issues with ethical questions about your ethics or work ethic in any of your jobs in the last 20 years?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And it sounds like you stayed in the accounting industry, so to speak, even though your license was revoked.
We're losing you.
Sorry.
Move the microphone, please.
Okay, that's right. Sounds like you stayed in the industry.
Correct.
Okay. As I mentioned in my opening statement, it's been about 20 years since your license was revoked. Was this your first attempt to get your license back, or were there other times in which you thought you might want to petition for your license back?
This is the first time I've actually gone through it. Through with it. I'd thought about it probably 3 or 4 times. I had ordered the package, I think, once or twice. I'd taken the CSCPA ethics exam a couple of times in anticipation of that, if I remember correctly. So it's been on my mind, and unfortunately, it's been on my mind for 20 years. But this is the first time I actually felt like personally I could go through with it. The prior times, I was not gonna be able to handle it emotionally, and so I wouldn't have been able to. This is hard enough.
Okay. And you're married,
I
right?
am.
And you have a son. How old's your son?
13.
Okay. And would you say that they have helped you in your rehabilitation process from
Yes.
that point 20 years ago?
More than you know.
Okay. Has your wife provided a letter for you?
She has.
Okay. And I believe hopefully the board members have that letter by now.
I've circulated that letter.
Okay. Have that marked as an exhibit?
Excuse me?
Can we have that marked and entered?
Yes,
as
so it's a March 20th, 2018 letter from Michelle Haynes. I will mark it as Exhibit A. Mr. Simon, do you have any objection to Exhibit A coming into evidence?
None, Your Honor.
Okay, so Exhibit A will be admitted into evidence.
Do you, sorry?
No, I was
Okay.
just going to say continue.
Do you plan to continue your current role as controller at this company in Costa Mesa, even if you receive your license back?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And if the board grants your petition for reinstatement, can you describe for the board how that will affect you?
First of all, it'll put to bed something a mistake that I made 20 years ago, that I haven't been able to really. It took me a long time to get over that. That's kind of where this started. But it'll allow me to. I've tried to go back and make I understand I want to say restitution, but fix some of those bridges that I burned over the last 20 years. This is probably the last step in doing that. So from that standpoint, it'll kind of put that to bed. Hope for me. Secondly, it will allow me to teach, which I used to teach when I was before this happened, and I really enjoyed it. And I believe I represented the profession very well at that time. But it'll allow me to teach and continue to represent the profession in a manner in which it should be. And then also, if I decide at some point to leave this organization, it'll open other doors for me to pursue my career.
Okay. You've also submitted some letters of recommendation. One is at PET 033. That was a letter from from a pastor at Compass Bible Church, dated October 12, 2017. Can you let us know how your participation at this church has affected you?
My number one goal in my life is to represent the love of Jesus Christ, frankly. And then my family comes right behind that. But my job is to represent him in the most positive light that I can, as I'm capable of. That the church has allowed me to understand more fully what my role is and how much I am loved regardless of what people think of me. And that was a big problem for me over the last 15 years, is my not being comfortable in my own skin. I now am. I've told my wife on a couple of occasions that I now have the life that I prayed for 20 years ago. And I'm not gonna, and a lot of that comes from the church. A lot of it comes from my wife and my son. And a lot of it came, frankly, from just going through the fire of what I went through for 20 years. And actually longer, but 20 years that you guys are concerned with. it's been a very difficult road for me. But I came out the other side. And that's it.
I have no further questions right now.
Mr. Sonic?
Yes, just very briefly, I think council has elicited some of the information that I sought. In your petition, in box 3 on page 6, you mentioned that you have provided restitution regarding the underlying events. Can you just describe what that restitution was, or?
Yeah, I paid the individual that filed the complaint before the complaint was actually filed. So at the time of the revocation, that debt had already been satisfied.
Thank you. And I think you answered the question about why you waited 20 years, and do I understand correctly that there have been more emotional inhibitions to your bringing this than any practical reason for bringing this petition? Is that correct?
That's a fair statement, yes.
Okay, and I'm not going to go into the specifics, but you have provided a couple medical letters, and would it be accurate to generally characterize them that any medical issues that may have existed in the past are under control and they're not inhibiting your ability to practice safely as an accountant?
Absolutely.
And I was going to ask a question on page PET 10, where you conclude your petition by saying, between my faith and my family, there is no doubt that I will represent our profession the way it should be. Is there anything further you want to add? I think you've explained the faith side. You want to add anything about the family, how that affects your ability to be a safe practitioner in the future?
Well, if I'm not, my wife will divorce me. That's not a good thing. I don't want that, number one. Number two, back then I was pretty much of a fill in your own adjective. Whatever it is, it'll fit. I was single. I was extremely prideful. And over the last number of years, I finally came to terms with what had happened with this license, and that's really been a lot of it. A lot of it has to do with my wife. She's very smart, very smart wife. I did very well, and she's really just keeps me on track. So she's really been a huge benefit to me.
Thank you. Two related questions. You have a letter from your pastor, which is at PET 33. Does your pastor know the circumstances of the original revocation of your license?
He does.
And the same question as to Ms. Katrina Trevino at PET 34. Does she
Yes.
know?
As does the men's group of my church.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Let's go the other way. Ms. Molina Lopez?
Yes, thank you. Will you please explain, or will you please elaborate for me your coping mechanisms when it comes to handling a stressful situation?
Frankly, the first thing I do is I try to avoid stressful situations, number one. When they do come up, I've learned that I guess the best way to say this is that prior to now, I would pretty much, my mind would go to the most extreme direction, and I would shut down, and I would be in my room for hours or a day or two. I no longer do that. I no longer need to. I now can talk to my wife. I now can talk to my pastor. I now can talk to my therapist or my psychiatrist, and they help me with many of these things. My pastor and my wife both are invaluable, and when I have those types of situations that that I'm able to now talk about it with people I would not do before. I was too prideful to bring that out and tell people that I had any sort of issue.
Thank you, I appreciate your response. No further questions.
Okay, Ms. Nicholson? Can I refer to the PET? Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah? Can you hear me? Can we refer to your continuing education reporting worksheet, PTO 12? This additional requirements in order to get back your license. Right now, I find that there are 110 hours claimed.
Correct. 110 and 1.5, yes, ma'am.
And can you do 19 hours of training in one day?
I can.
Okay. No further questions.
Now, understand that I will do, if I remember correctly, that's a great question. If I remember correctly, I would do one particular subject, and then I would do one or two more later on, and I would later print the certificates, if I remember correctly. But I don't know for exactly what the situation was, but if I had to do 24 hours, I could do it. I did it in college, I could do it again.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Savoy?
So if I understand the line of questioning, you will not do anything different professionally by getting your certificate back, is that correct?
Anything different than I do now, is that your question?
Yes.
That is correct.
So this is more of a pride thing, you want to get your license
Not so
back?
much a pride thing. I wouldn't categorize it that way. To me, it will allow me to better represent the profession, and it will open some doors for me that currently are not open. As I'm sure all of you know, having that license does give you certain benefits, and those benefits right now are I'm not able to apply to positions that, for example, require a CPA or prefer a CPA. I don't. So I'm not allowed to do that. So that's really what it comes down to.
So
It's not an issue of pride at all.
So your intention is to stay in private industry and not perform any functions that a CPA would normally perform?
My intention is to stay in private industry, yes. I've been in private industry for 20 years, 15 years. I don't know that I could go back into public accounting other than because of the history of my background. Other than going to my own practice, and I'm sure as heck not going to do that.
Thank you.
So I'm going to stay in private industry.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Famler?
Yes, if your license was to be reinstated, are you comfortable that you can maintain all of your CPE and other requirements to maintain your license going forward?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Thank you. No further questions?
Mr. Silverman?
Yes, two brief questions, Your Honor. Mr. Haynes, Ms. Trevino, who wrote this letter on your behalf, said you worked at Leslie's Pool Supplies together. What period of time was that?
I'm thinking, honestly. I don't really remember. There was a period in my life where I wanted to hide. I didn't want to have any stress. I didn't want to have any involvement with, frankly, anybody, to be honest with you, but really with, and so the economy changed, the recession had occurred. I couldn't get a position as a CFO anywhere. When I came back to California, it was very difficult. So I took a position that my brother-in-law had recommended to me for a period of time until I found another position as the controller.
Okay, and I'm just trying to understand it in terms of the list of things that you said you did over the years. I was trying to place it where it might be.
Right after we came back from Nevada.
Okay,
If I remember correctly.
So sometime around 2010?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And one other question, what subject or subjects would you like to be teaching in school?
Accounting and finance.
Any particular aspects of it?
Beginning. Mainly because I really enjoy the debits and credits side of things, and the people that take, the kids that take the beginning accounting classes, I enjoy watching them figure out debits and credits, which I know I had an issue with college initially in the first year, maybe longer, but I enjoy that. It's just it's also the basis for everything that we do going forward, and it's a good solid background to have, and I try to emphasize that to my students because of the fact that if whether they're going to be accountants or whether they're going to be business majors, they've got to take that class, and they need to have a solid background, and I want to make sure they have that background going forward. If they're going for whether they're going for an accounting degree or a degree in marketing or whatever, they need to understand how accounting works. It's the basis of virtually everything.
Thank you.
That's my answer.
Ms. Burhoff?
Thank you. Just to piggyback a little bit on Mr. Silverman, so this is, if your license is restored, you want to teach, do you plan to expand, I don't know if you could expand a little bit more about anything else you would like to do with your license? If this is not just if it's not a pride thing, is there something other than teaching you want to use your license for?
As I said, I would like to go back to being a CFO again.
Okay.
Right now in the position that I'm in, I don't have that opportunity. So at some point I would like to have that opportunity back, and this would make it, it would open more doors for me, I guess is the best way to put it.
Thank you.
Ms. Salazar?
No questions.
Mr. Jacobson?
Sir, in the time period back in, I guess it was 94 when your father passed.
Yes, sir.
And there was the issues going on, including a foreclosure. Did the money that you got, your ill-gotten gains, as it were, was that used to pay that the mortgage, if you recall?
I believe it was. But I don't really remember. But I believe it was. I believe that's what the purpose of it was. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobson, do you have any additional questions?
I do not.
Okay, Mr. Campos?
Yeah, no questions for the petitioner, but along those same lines of that discussion, I would urge us to maybe look at pages PET 6, 9, and 39 about potential portions of those pages that should be redacted or sealed.
Your Honor, maybe I can suggest that immediately upon conclusion, we can take a break and we can sort that language out and maybe we can redact the original copy or.
That would be great. Yes.
I'm sorry, you said pages 6?
PET 6, 9, and then 39.
6, 9, and 39?
Yeah,
Thank
those
you.
are the ones I saw where there was reference to that.
Thank you.
Okay, and do you have any questions? Okay, Ms. Leon?
No questions.
Ms. Wright?
Yes, thank you. You've mentioned that going forward, you hope to be able to teach, and that's one of the reasons to get your CPA license, and then also probably to stay in the private sector. How important, particularly with your teaching responsibilities, do you perceive the concept of ethics to be in the administration both of your work environment in the private sector as well as what you would impart to students in the classroom?
Extremely important.
Could you expand on that just a little?
Absolutely, I'd be glad to. and I'll harken back, if you will, to 20 years ago, when my attitude was more of a, what's the worst that's going to happen? This never occurred to me, frankly. The losing my license wasn't one of the options that I conceived of. So my ethics were somewhat malleable, I guess you could say. Today, that's not the case. With the advent of what I've learned over the last 20 years, with the advent of my faith and my adherence to that, and the fact that I want to bring people to the business environment, the business space, if you will, that are understand the business of understand ethics more than I think, frankly, we do now. And sadly, I think there's some ethical issues in business overall, and I would like to see that change. And if I can, in some small way, impart that to the students, that's what I'm going to try to do.
One follow-up question, Your Honor?
Yes.
Earlier, you indicated that you had engaged in this behavior back in 1990s out of a consequence of financial issues and the death of a father and so forth. You were not, do I understand correctly, you were not trying to justify your actions, but trying to explain the context, is that correct?
That's correct. The underlying problem was the fact that I suffered from depression. I did my entire life. I just didn't know it. And I now see that in other parts of my parents, which my guess were kind of where I got it from. But it was a position where I've never, as I said before, I never in my life felt comfortable in my own skin. I was always trying to please other people. And so as a result, I never really just took stock of myself. I now know, I've now become me. I haven't seen this person in my life. I like him, he's cool. But the individual that was 20 years ago, I have no idea who that was, and I have no desire to know him ever again. They say that lepers don't change their spots. I did. And regardless, I'll be honest with you, regardless of what you guys do, I've done more. I have a lot more work to do with my wife. I did a lot of damage there, and I've got to. They still have me an entire lifetime to make it up to her, but nothing that I say should be construed as being justification. There was no justification for what I did, other than the fact that I was just a jerk, and that's all. I mean, I wish I could blame it on drugs or alcohol, but I don't have that excuse. I was just an idiot. So.
Well, that was responsive. I'm not sure I would have phrased any answer that way. And maybe we can mark that one little snippet about a medical issue and just mark that. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Gateway, do you have any further questions?
No, nothing further.
Okay, let's just go off the record for 2 seconds. Let's get back on the record.
Over the break, we discussed the documents that either should be redacted or placed under seal, and council have agreed that the following documents should be redacted with respect to reference to certain health issues suffered by petitioner. Page 6, page 8, page 9, and page 38, and then the pages 39, 40, and 41 will be placed under seal. Is that, do you agree, Ms.
Yes,
Goodwin?
I agree.
Okay, and Mr.
Yes.
Giscon? Okay, great. So that's that, and so let's move on to closing. Ms. Gateway?
Thank you, Your Honor, and board members. I think, we've gone through everything. I just want to emphasize that I think Mr. Haynes has said it best in his testimony, that the person that he was 20-some-odd years ago is not the person that he is now. He has changed. I think he's expressed a lot of remorse and has acknowledged what he did wrong back then and has done everything that he has been able to do professionally as well as personally to make sure that this situation won't arise again. I don't think he wants to be here in front of you guys anymore. So I think that's really just it.
Mr. Sani?
Yes, again, as I indicated before, there's always this balancing process between matters that favor restoration of the license and those which do not. In this case, it's difficult to identify anything that disfavors specifically restoration of the license. The factors in favor of it, the rehabilitation, his job history is all expressive of rehabilitation. And probably from my experience, the most, and under the disciplinary guidelines, the most significant factor to bear in mind is that 20 years have passed. That's an unusually long period of time, and there is no evidence during the 20 years that there have been recurrences of the problems that caused the original revocation of his license. So it's the board's obligation simply to determine whether you put all that together, whether that amounts in the board's mind to clear and convincing evidence of rehabilitation sufficient for the restoration of his license, and no further comments beyond that.
Thank you. Ms. Gatewood, anything else?
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Does the board have any final questions? No? Okay, so then we are done with this matter and the record is closed. And we'll take a 5-minute break. Let's go on the record. Okay, we are here in the matter of the petition for early termination of probation filed by Robert John Grimes. The OAH case number is 2018-010045. Today's date is March 22nd, 2018. The time is a little bit before 3:30 in the afternoon. We are in Irvine, California. My name is Cindy Foreman, and I'm the Administrative Law Judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings, assigned to sit with the California Accountancy Board, which is convened here today to consider this petition. May I take the appearances for the record, beginning with the Attorney General's office?
Yes, good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the board. I am Deputy Attorney General Carl Sani, appearing on behalf of the Attorney General and the people of the state of California, pursuant to Business and Professions Code, Section 5115.
Okay, Mr. Grimes, do you want to just state your name for the record, please?
Robert John Grimes.
And Mr. Grimes, I know that you've sat through, it seems like 2 hours of hearings before, and you've gotten to observe the procedures?
I'm familiar with the process.
Okay, I'm just going to go through it a little quickly, what's going to happen, and then if you have any questions, please let me know.
Sure.
Okay, since you don't have counsel today, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and since you're representing yourself today, let me tell you that the burden of proof is on you to establish that you're entitled to an early termination of your probation. The Deputy Attorney General will first offer the petition that you filed and any other documents that you filed in support of your petition, and will outline the background of the case. And then you may make, then I will swear you in, and then you will have the opportunity to make your presentation to the board and submit any documents that are not included in the package. You may testify on your own behalf, you may call witnesses on your own behalf, and then members of the board and the Deputy Attorney General, as you've seen with the prior petitioners, will probably have questions for you. And you have the right to raise legal objections to any questions. I realize, I don't know if you're a lawyer or not, but if you have a question about the questions, I can't give you legal advice, but I can help you through the process. After all the petitions have been heard, the board is going to meet in closed session. for deliberations. The board's decision will not be announced today. A written decision will be mailed to you as soon as possible. I'm not involved in making the decision today. The decision is by the board. Okay. Do you have any questions about the proceedings?
Not at the moment.
Okay, so let's get started. Okay. Mr. Sani?
Thank you. I would first like to mark for identification and offer into evidence as Exhibit 1 the February 8th memorandum from Mr. Franzella to the board members that forwards the original petition packet with the accompanying documents that have been marked as RJG-PET 001 to 038. That exhibit contains the petition with attachments at pages 5 to 21, the original statement of issues under which licensure was granted at PET 23 to 29, the decision in order per a stipulated settlement that's found at pages PET 30 to 36, and the last document is the license history at pages 37 to 38. The board members and petitioner have been provided a copy of this same exhibit. They total 38 pages, which I'll refer to as PET followed by the page number when I make reference to it. Mr. Grimes received his certificate number 124983 on September 25th, 2014, per a decision on the stipulated settlement as set forth in the license history at 37. The underlying discipline, which was the basis for the stipulated settlement and licensure, arose from respondent's conviction for first-degree burglary, assault in the second degree with a domestic violence with firearm enhancement, Class A felonies in the state of Washington. The facts and circumstances are summarized in Mr. Franzella's memo at page 2, and in the statement of issues found at pages 23 to 29. The petition contains a variety of documents, including letters of reference. And specifically, I would like at this point to call the board's attention and your honor's attention to page PET 21. That is a document that we believe ought to be placed under seal from a medical professional. There will be some discussion of this letter, but really in the oblique fashion that I can make it, and we can deal with my questions and any answers at that time. So with that, Your Honor, I would request that the witness be sworn in. If not, I'll...
Okay, I'm going to mark before I swear the witness in as Exhibit 1 the petition documents described by Mr. Sani. They're Bates numbered PET 001 to PET 038. Mr. Grimes, have you had a chance to review the documents?
Yes, I have.
And do you have any objection to Exhibit 1 coming into evidence for jurisdictional purposes?
I do not.
Okay, so Exhibit 1 will be admitted. Mr. Sani, just briefly, I know that you mentioned page 21, but I believe there's another reference.
Well, on page 3, Your Honor.
Yes, I think I caught that when I briefly went through this. Yeah.
Mr. Campos has been instructed in telling us to look at not just the source document, but the other references to it. So page 3, the second paragraph, Your Honor.
Yes.
And there is a pertinent term that deals with these issues in the stipulated settlement, but that's already a public record, Your Honor. I don't think it would be appropriate to put it under seal.
Okay, so I am going to order that the RJG PET 021 be placed under seal, and and maybe the paragraph on PET 003 should be redacted Does that,
That's satisfactory.
is that satisfactory? Okay, is that satisfactory to you, Mr. Grimes?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, Mr. Grimes, please stand up and I will swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Please sit down and please state your name again for the record.
My name is Robert John Grimes.
Mr. Grimes, it's always a little awkward to be testifying on your own behalf, and I don't know if you want to have, if you have a statement you'd like to make, or whether you would like Mr. Sonny to start asking you questions, and then I will allow you to add whatever information you want after those questions.
Yeah, I
whatever
think
you
I would
like.
prefer to start with Mr. Sonny.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions here that deal with your petition, Mr. Grimes. One of the terms, one of the questions that you raise are a basis for seeking early termination of your probation was that you have been compliant with all the terms of probation to date, correct?
Yes.
And would you agree, though, that every probationer who is compliant with the mandated terms of probation is in the same boat as you, so to speak?
Yes.
There's nothing that
would make sense.
distinguishes your case of being in compliance with other probationers who are in compliance as a basis for terminating probation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. Now, one of the mentions that, or one of the statements that you make is that this early termination of probation connects to your becoming a shareholder in the firm in which you're presently employed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you identify how terminating probation enhances or is material to the determination to make you a shareholder?
Yeah, sure. So the owner of my firm gave me the offer of partnership last summer, and I was going to go to the meeting in September. It just so happened that the meeting in San Diego was on September 15th, which as a tax firm, that is pretty busy time for us. So I decided to defer it into this year. He's open to bringing me on. He's contacted the CBA directly himself, asked if there was any issues. It's just a matter of both parties, myself and him, feeling more comfortable with having this probationary status removed from my license before bringing me on and making an announcement to the firm's clients.
Thank you. So you are not stating that the offer that has been discussed with you is actually contingent on the termination of your probation, is it?
It is not contingent, but it may get deferred until this is lifted.
Okay. And the owner of the firm that you're talking about is Mr. Brown, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah, Mark Brown.
And he has supplied a letter that's found at page PET 17?
That's correct.
And you would agree, though, that he does not indicate that there's any contingency or deferral of your admission as a shareholder depending on the outcome of this hearing, correct?
True, he does not say that, yeah.
Now, you also state that you're in compliance with probation, and one of the terms of probation is one of the last terms of your stipulated settlement. I'd like to draw your attention specifically to page PET 35 and paragraph 12. You're familiar with that obligation?
Yes.
And I understand that you have, at least to the present, you have been compliant with that term in the sense that you've been participating in the required therapy, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and you have supplied a letter, maybe we can, dated January 26 of this year, in which it is indicated that you're still in this process of complying with that term, correct?
Correct.
And you have not submitted to the board or had the treating therapist submit to the board reports to the CBA that, that this requirement can cease, correct?
Yeah, that is correct when it comes to this particular doctor. I did have a separate letter submitted by, I thought was a licensed psychotherapist. There was some confusion to that. Apparently she was a licensed social worker. So that was submitted with my quarterly compliance report. And it was not disallowed, but it was told that I needed to see a PhD level for the purposes of everything. So she, in her letter, which was submitted with my quarterly compliance report, did say that she felt that I no longer needed to be seen.
Okay, and that letter, you understand, did not meet the minimum terms?
Yes, I understand that now.
And subsequent to that letter, you did obtain a letter or engage in compliance with this provision through another
Yes.
appropriate?
Yes, the previous psychotherapist I was seeing for about a year and a half before all that, before I switched doctors, I went back to her, and my enforcement officer had told me that I had 30 days to go see a licensed psychotherapist, so I just went back to her. So the January 21st or whatever date that was within the 30 days. So there wasn't really enough time, and then now, of course, I'm working 70, 80 hours a week. So there hasn't been time to see her enough times for her to write this letter. But she told me that she would write this letter if she needed to. It's just hasn't gone there at this point.
Okay, but you don't have any such letter with you, or?
I do not, no.
Okay. So as far as evidence to the board goes, this term you have not been released from this term of obtaining continuing psychotherapy, correct?
Correct. And in fact, for most of this time, both me and the doctor have both been, I would say somewhat confused, but not aware of the fact that we could just end this thing. You know, it's been 3.5 years since I've been licensed, so I thought it was just a condition, hey, if I'm on probation, I need to keep seeing her. So.
How many times have you seen this person who wrote this restatement?
Twice a year.
Twice a year?
Yeah. And that's all present in my quarterly reports.
Okay. Okay, you have also provided to the board a letter from Mr. Brown, as we discussed before at PET 17. Does Mr. Brown know the circumstances of your, the nature of your probation, the cause of your probation?
Yes, he does.
I'd like you to look at Mr. Zillen's letter at page PET 18. Mr. Zillen does not appear to make a reference to his knowledge of the circumstances that gave rise to your probation. Does he have knowledge, or have you talked to him about it?
He is aware. Michael Zillen is he worked at the firm. His father was the senior partner at the firm I worked at before I moved to California. So he is aware. His father was aware at the time as well. Now, of course, Michael, his son, has started his own practice. And so he's the one who submitted this. So this is from Mike Jr., not Mike Sr.
Okay, and then he makes a reference in the second to the last sentence that I am honored to recommend him for certification. Do you know what certification he's talking about there?
Yeah, I'm not sure. He knows that I'm licensed CPA. So he knows that I was coming before the board to get the probation removed. So that must have been what he was referring to.
So the letters that you submitted, am I correct that the only letter that speaks to knowledge of the circumstances of your original probation is the letter from your wife at page 20? Is that correct?
Actually, every person who submitted letters here is aware of the circumstances as to why I'm on probation, including Adam French, who was one of my first clients that I acquired back in 2012. And he submitted letters with my original licensing. And in fact, my wife as well submitted a letter back then with the initial licensing.
So just my sort of final question goes back to kind of the first question. Other than being a factor which would facilitate or potentially speed up your admission into this firm as a shareholder, is there any other reason that you can present to the board as to why you believe your probation ought to be terminated early?
Why it ought to be, or what would the benefit be?
Why you would request the board to terminate your probation other than that consideration?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course, the quarterly compliance. And of course, when that information is public record, it's, there is always a possibility that if someone requested that information, they could get it. And so just by looking online nowadays on a license lookup, you can see that information. So that is an area that, it's always been kind of always lurking over my shoulder for the past 3.5 years.
I have no further questions at this time.
Okay, Ms. Wright?
Thank you. With the visits with the psychotherapist, can you explain how you feel, because I don't see a whole lot of additional activity related to rehabilitation. So can you explain the road that you've taken to rehabilitate yourself so that you can explain to us why the circumstances that occurred so many years ago would not occur again, that would not be a risk?
Absolutely. So this occurred, in 1999, and then I got released from the penitentiary in 2004. So during that period of time, I did a lot of thinking about what I was going to do. When this event happened, I was already a student at the University of Washington, and so when I got released, I got back in college within a few months, and I worked very hard. And after that, I've been passing the CPA, and then of course working in the industry for 11 years. It's my 11th tax season now, with no incidences since then. Very stable relationships, as you can tell, with the same people have submitted letters. And of course, even my current boss, the owner of my firm, is, he obviously feels comfortable enough. So, those things, as far as the state of Washington, they did ask me to go through a lot of anger management, victims awareness back then, and I complied with everything. All restitution was paid in full. And so, we're going on almost 19 years since anything has ever happened. There's been no issue since then.
And currently, the firm is signing the tax returns that you prepare. Is that how you're handling the tax preparer licensing requirement in the state of California?
You mean as far as excuse me?
What you currently prepare tax returns, and you've done so for approximately 11 years, I think?
Yes, I'm the senior manager at our firm, yes.
Okay. And who signs the returns that you prepare?
That would be the owner of our firm.
Okay, that was the question.
Okay.
No further questions, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Leon?
I'd love to hear more about the urgency to shorten the termination. You're almost 1.5 years away. Time flies really quickly, up on August 31st. Why now?
Okay, you're going to need to just lean into the mic a little bit.
So I
I understand how close it is, and a lot of people would say, hey, why don't you just, write it out? But, the offer of partnership is there. Our firm has been in Point Loma, San Diego for 50 years. The founding partner passed away in 2016. And so this is a great opportunity. And if this is what the owner of the firm makes everybody feel more comfortable, it makes me feel more comfortable as well. Because if I'm investing in the firm, I would prefer to have, this cleared up as well. So that is the urgency, because the offer is there now. Succession plan for him is probably within the 4 to 5 year window. And so the sooner we get going, the better.
Thank you.
Sure.
No further questions.
Mr. Campos?
Thank you. You're not licensed anywhere outside of California?
No, I'm not.
Okay. And, clearly a very egregious action from 1999.
Absolutely.
And I see the letter from your wife. And absent any communications from those professionals that you're currently seeing, and you mentioned these items that the state of Washington asked you to participate in around that time. How do we get comfort that your relationships, your stability is such that these events would not recur? Give us a little more context. What is it?
Sure.
What's your go-to coping mechanism then to avoid those situations?
Well, I would say that the evidence of all the rehabilitation in the state of Washington is evidenced by how I was no longer on what they call community placement when you're released. That I am no longer under the Department of Corrections in the state of Washington. There's no issue there. When it comes to the stability factor, it was a very difficult time in my life, and any conflict that happens in my life now, nothing's as bad as I've seen and as hard as I've seen, living in a situation like I had to live in for those 5 years. So there's nothing that can really upset me like anymore, because nothing's as bad as what I've seen in the past. So that's my coping mechanism. And when it came to the license, I was just happy to have the license. I was just happy because I worked so hard for it, and happy to have a job, and happy to I passed the test and then got denied by the state of California, and it was a very tough time. So now I'm just happy to have the license.
Last question. With respect to your license, your renewal in the middle of your probationary period did not occur timely. So you had a period of time where you actually had a delinquent or expired license.
I think it has something to do with the fee, that something to I don't recall exactly what happened, but I think something with the PO box and the fee or something like that. And so as soon as I caught wind that it wasn't, or no, maybe it was a continuing education requirement, and there was some discrepancies on that because of the timing versus the calendar year versus the year of which my license was first issued. So as soon as that I was notified of that discrepancy, then I had it resolved and just submitted. It was just a matter of submitting certificates, as far as I understand.
So maybe give me some more clarity on that. So you're indicating you submitted your renewal and information on a timely basis to secure that renewal?
Yes.
And there were some things that caused a delay in that renewal being approved? Correct. Then that's what led to ultimately you being issued?
Yeah, as soon as they requested the additional certificates, and the courses and education had already been completed. It just, obviously, I was confused about the timing, because when you have that first renewal period, and I just got licensed, I think, the year before, or something like that. I was slightly confused on what I needed to submit for that particular period.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jacobson?
Thank you, Your Honor. The tax returns that you prepare, excuse me, but the owner of the company signs, do you know if the owner of the company substantively reviews those tax returns before he signs them?
Absolutely.
And he does, before he signs them, he does substantively review them?
So the ones that I prepare, he reviews those, and then those get signed and go through processing. Other returns that other people prepare, the staff in the office, I review those, and then he reviews those after me. So we have a double layer of review for those returns.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Salazar?
No questions.
Ms. Burkhoff?
Thank you. So if you could clear up a couple things for me. So are you still seeing a psychotherapist?
I am, and the only reason really is because I felt that it was required to maintain my license. And it was only till about the third quarter of last year when I started going down this road of getting, for this petition, where I realized that I could actually have a doctor sign a letter and I could get released from that part of the requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, but you first went to a social worker who did not have a PhD And you found out that that did not meet the requirements of our original statement, our original decision?
For the first year and a half, I saw Dr. Catherine Moore, who submitted this letter here.
Okay.
And I saw her, and then I had a change of insurance. So then I went to see another, who I thought was a licensed psychotherapist, but she apparently was a licensed social worker. And so I saw her for a while, and then upon submitting the quarterly report was when the enforcement analyst had told me that, sorry, she's not a licensed psychotherapist, she's a licensed social worker. So that's when they said, okay, you need to go see, and that's why I went back to her.
Okay, and how long were you seeing technically the social worker?
Yeah, it was, I saw, well, this office, Pierce County, or excuse me, not Pierce County, Psychiatric Centers of San Diego. It is, there was one nurse practitioner saw me, there was a doctor that saw me, and then there was this licensed social worker who saw me. So I would say that period of time was probably 9 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once you went back to the psychotherapist, how long did you see that psychotherapist?
I've seen her since January 26th. I've seen her twice since then.
And twice a year to meet your probation requirements?
Well, actually, January 26th of this year, I saw her once, and then I saw her again a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And it was to talk about, everything involved, and if there was a because I do have another reporting period coming up.
Right.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure that I met with her enough times to satisfy that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Silverman?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Follett?
Yes, do you, in addition to the social worker or individuals you've been seeing, do you see others, or anger management, or any other individuals to help you cope or manage any particular issues?
I don't anymore. I did that as a stipulation of what the Washington State required of me back then. And that all ended in 2004. And so since then, I haven't seen anybody else. Any issues that have ever happened have not demanded it, so.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions.
Mr. Savoy?
No questions.
Ms. Nicholson?
Yes, after your partner retires, would you be the sole shareholder of this firm?
That depends on the level, how large our business is at that time. I feel that I could manage our book with another one of me working there also, so a manager under me who can produce as much as I produce. If I don't have that, or if the business grows substantially, then I may consider merging with another smaller firm.
But current partner, owner will retire after.
Yes, that's the plan, yeah.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Molina Lopez?
No questions.
Mr. Sonny?
Just one follow-up question. Is the owner preparing to retire anytime in the future?
He's 62, I believe, now, and we plan on the succession to, like I said, 4 or 5 years, and so then he would be retired. His wife lives up in Oregon, and so he would like to spend more time up there because they bought a bunch of property up there. He lived in California. They said, hey, let's buy some property up there. It's cheaper, and so he would like to spend more time with her. So that's the plan.
Anything further?
No.
Mr. Crimes, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'm not really sure what else to say. I've done everything that was asked, and I would appreciate if the board would be so kind to, grant me the termination 18 months early, so that they're, it definitely helped my upward mobility, and I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Sonny, do you have a closing statement you'd like to make?
Just very briefly, Mr. Grimes has obviously come a long way from the events which gave rise to his original, the original conviction. The one concern that, that I had raised before is There is a term in the stipulated settlement that requires this psychotherapy, and it provides that it can effectively be eliminated by Mr. Grimes and his therapist once there is a determination that it is no longer necessary. And we're 3.5 years into his probation, and that has not been secured. And that's the issue that raises issues about public protection. The board, is not exactly in the same position as a petition for reinstatement, because the board has already issued its order and can modify it when it has good cause to do so. But that would be the one term that I would suggest, deserves some specific consideration, and there may be a way of dealing with that term, but that would be for the board to determine if it's appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Grimes, do you have anything more to add?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or anything before we close the record? No? Okay, so thank you. The record's closed. And Mr. Grimes, just wait around and the court reporter will give you a transcript. 5-minute break, and then we are going to go into closed session.
Okay, stop, okay.
All right, back from closed session, we're on the record again. We're going to move out of order again. Mr. DeLiza, would you like to give your report?
Thank you. I've got a couple of items here. We'll start with item 7C1, the Peer Review Oversight Committee's report on the meeting from February 9th. We met on February 9th in the CBA offices in Sacramento, and I'd like to thank Mr. Familette for attending the meeting and providing an overview of the January 2018 CBA meeting. At our meeting, the members reported on the various oversight activities that had taken place between our previous meeting in December. And we discussed and voted to approve the establishment of a subcommittee to kind of further evaluate and implement continued revisions to our PROC administrative site visit to the Cal CPA. Those oversight procedures, if you're not aware, that's probably one of the more important oversight activities that we do conduct each year, where we go on site at the Cal CPA. And so we've been a continual kind of revision process to make sure that that's updated as we move forward. Additionally, we considered some substitutions and revisions to some of the oversight checklists that we do, particularly the NASBA Compliance Assurance Committee checklist. And again, if you're not aware, these checklists that we use are the primary way that we document the oversight activities we do and the conclusions we reach from those activities. The remainder of that meeting was spent focused on reviewing and making edits and approving the 2017 PROC annual report, which is my next topic.
Can't wait.
Any questions on our meeting? Then we will move on to the next item. Second item is the 2017 Peer Review Oversight Committee Annual Report. I'd like to thank the fellow members of the committee and the CBA staff for all of their dedication and hard work over the past year and the work that goes into preparing this report. The annual report includes information on various activities and accomplishments, information on the oversight functions performed by the PROC, and various statistical information. 2017 was a busy year, in spite of the fact that we did have one meeting that we had to cancel. There was a lot of activities in there. I won't go through and read the whole report, but just to highlight a few of the items that are in there. Again, the continued evaluation and refinement of that administrative site visit process was one of the functions. The assessment of 2 new AICPA enhanced audit quality initiatives that became effective in 2017. One was the new AICPA's Prima system, which is their software system that does process management and manages the peer review function, and then the AICPA's new benchmark model for administering entities. The consideration of the California peer reviewer population through written communications with both the AICPA and the Cal CPA was another important initiative of this last year, and I know that the CBA helped us with writing some of those letters. And that work concluded that at this time, neither of those entities have a current framework which effectively monitors the peer reviewer population in a manner that would allow our committee and the CBA to thoroughly evaluate that population and its impact on the ongoing peer review. However, the PROC does plan to work collaboratively with both the AICPA and the CalCPA in the coming year to establish and implement a peer reviewer population monitoring framework so that we can keep track of that and evaluate. Additionally, we updated the PROC procedures manual to remain relevant, specifically those sections related to committee membership and qualification and oversight responsibilities. And then last, we enhanced the peer review related statistics that are found in the report so that the CBA has kind of a statistical overview of the peer review program in California. Based on these activities and the others that are in the report, we reached a conclusion that the AICPA peer review program functions effectively in accordance with the standards that are adopted by the AICPA, and our committee recommends that the CBA adopt the 2017 annual report and continue to provide us guidance as we move forward in our oversight activities. I will turn this discussion back over to the President and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
One
Yes.
question. Thank you, Mr. DeLyser. Would you please help me understand why the August meeting was canceled?
As we entered, one of the topics from last year's report on this was that we had several members that were due to term off this last year. And so we had 4 vacancies that happened to us, and so we weren't able to meet a quorum for that August meeting. We have since filled 3 of those positions and only have a single vacancy, assuming that as you get to the agenda item on appointments, and we do thank you for that.
Thank you. Is that level of detail included in this report?
As to the reason.
Why the vacancy happened, or no, I'm sorry, why the meeting was canceled and the fact that it was due to vacancy on the...
I don't think it is, but I think that all it lists is the meetings that were held.
I don't know whether it would be a good idea to include that level of detail. For my benefit, I was curious.
Probably not, I would think. I mean, just in terms of the report, like it's more stuff than what's warranted in there. Did you have any other questions?
Yes, Jose.
On page 12, the other state societies.
Yes.
And there's a paragraph in here on, PROC discussed about possibly revising procedures on how to do future oversight. Can you maybe provide a little more context for what's in here, little implications of what we're talking about? I mean, the vast majority of our population is covered by what happens at CalCPA, but I think you're acknowledging there are some others that could have implications under mobility or other reasons why that population would impact us.
Certainly, it is allowable for a California CPA firm to have their peer review administered by another state and not use the California Society. While it is a very rare occurrence, it is possible. And so to the extent that possible, our committee likes to take a look at what are those other state administering entities doing, who's oversighting them. While we can't physically go to those administering entities as they're out of state, we can get the AICPA's oversight reports. The AICPA themselves go and oversight each of these administering entities, and those reports are public. And so what we do is we obtain those things, take a look at what is the AICPA noticing when they go to oversight those administering entities, and kind of track how are they improving those if they had findings from the last time that they reported. And so we have a process that kind of takes those states and creates kind of a rotation. Each year we do a few of those states. Those oversights are done every other year, and so we kind of have a rotation. And so this year we kind of discussed, is there a more logical way to basically select the states that we're using? Is there a way to figure out what's the likelihood that a California firm is using Nevada or Texas or New York as an administering entity, and can we hit those entities more often to be more effective? And so that was what that discussion entailed.
Okay.
Any other questions?
There is a spot that you mentioned, I'm sorry, I do have questions.
No.
There's a flow chart mentioned in here, page 17 of this report, I guess. Is that attached to this? I didn't see it.
It's not attached to this. It was attached to the meeting materials for the January CBA meeting,
Okay.
but it's actually a part of our procedures manual now. And it's a flow chart that tracks exactly what's the process of peer review.
Okay, so it wasn't intended to be attached.
It wasn't
to this
intended to be a
annual
part of this report, but it is part of our procedures manual now.
So you just described it, all right. I move approval of the annual report.
Second.
Any more discussion, any public comment? We go around the horn.
Okay. Alicia Burhow,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
George Familek,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yep.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes,
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
and Kathleen Wright.
Yes. Yes.
motion passes. Thank you so much. Before we jump ahead to the next item, I just forgot to mention regarding our dinner, the hotel will be supplying a shuttle leaving at 5:40, 5:45?
It'll leave at 5:50, so.
5:50,
Yeah,
just
5:50.
whatever. So be there or be square. We're jumping ahead to item number 12. Under the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, item 12B, Katrina.
It's me.
I know you weren't ready
I'm
for
ready.
this. Oh, you are.
I'm ready.
It's all you.
All right, thanks. The first item is report of the Pacific Regional Director. So I would like to share with you that I led a conference call that was attended by 7 states and jurisdictions, of course, including California. It was attended by NASBA staff and their board members, including the NASBA chair, Ted Long. I was introduced at this meeting as NASBA's new Pacific Regional Director. And that occurred subsequent to Jim Black's resignation.
Hey, can I get this autograph?
Yeah.
It's got a picture of Katrina.
Shucks. So at the regional meeting, again, this was not held in person, it's done by phone, over phone, but there was a recap of the highlights of the January NASBA meeting, and some of those things that are worth just sharing here, in case you are not just spending all of your time reading NASBA communications, is that there was an approval of a mutual recognition agreement with Scotland, which has to do with mobility and licensing between our countries. There was a presentation of a data technologist pathway related to data analytics. So that is something that AICPA and NASBA have created a small task force, and that is something, the topic of an additional licensure will be something that will be discussed further at the upcoming regional meetings. Which leads me to the announcement of the Western Regional Meeting will be held Tuesday, June 26th through Thursday, June 28th, and it is in Lake Tahoe, so it is within our state, and I would like to encourage our board members to attend if it fits into your schedule. And NASBA is also reaching out to new board members on all of the various state boards and asking that they attend the new board member orientation. So there will be something there for board members with a lot of depth of experience, as well as those that are newer to our state board. So it should be a valuable trip for those who can attend, or learning experience for those who are able to attend.
When is that again?
It is June 26th through June 28th, and it will be in Olympic Valley, which is the north side of Lake Tahoe.
Does that pose any issues with the governor's office approving because it's within the state?
So we don't have out-of-state travel. So this is a good opportunity for exposure to a lot of these issues.
So it's on the California side.
It's on the California side, yes, exactly. So the other thing that happens as part of the regional calls is we do get updates. So I would say thank you to Mr. Savoy for being present, and as well as Patty on that call, and making sure that the rest of the region was updated on California business. Arizona did discuss deregulation legislation currently pending in their state and being discussed.
Guam has a new testing center that is, should be complete by now. It's scheduled for mid-March. And Patty may have more of an update on that from her last ED conference. Hawaii legislature was at that time hearing a mobility bill at the end of February, and I understand that that was not a successful legislative attempt, but again, around our region, mobility continues to be an issue. And in Washington legislature, there is hearing a bill, or at that time was hearing a bill to allow Canadian firms to complete audits within the state of Washington. So there's a lot of opportunity to share issues, and that those discussions shape the regional meeting. So one of the points was that boards were asked to please pay attention to the focus questions that NASBA has asked for. You know, our board is doing that, but those responses that come back will be integral to helping develop the curriculum of that conversation that will happen at the June event. And that concludes my report on the Pacific region.
Don't go anywhere,
I
because
will
we'll
have
come
to
right back to
continue.
you in a second. Ms. Reed, do you have anything on item 2, which is discussion and approval of staff responses to NASB's focus questions?
The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the CBA with proposed responses to the NASBA focus questions. The responses assist the NASBA regional directors with staying apprised of each state's policies, procedures, and recent activities. The CBA may take a motion to approve the attached focus questions or direct staff to make any changes prior to submitting the responses to NASBA. At this time, I would like to turn it back over to President Savoy and would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on these questions? Sorry.
It's getting late.
I'd like to entertain a motion.
I move.
Second? Any further discussion? Any public comment? All, take it around.
All right, Kathleen Wright?
Yes?
Mark Silvermoon?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Carola Nicholson?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
And Alicia Burhout.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Katrina, item number 3.
All right, so 3A is the bylaws committee. I'd like to share, and it may already have been an item on a prior meeting, but I have been selected to chair the bylaws committee. So I've already engaged NASBA and NASBA's council in initial discussions, talk about potential bylaws revisions for committee consideration in 2018. And ultimately, the goal of this committee is to evaluate and bring forward proposals for bylaws changes at the October annual NASBA meeting. So I would like to report that the first formal committee meeting has been scheduled. It will be by conference call among the various members, and that will be held on Monday, April 30th. And that concludes the bylaws committee report.
How about the Enforcement Resource
Keep going.
Committee?
So I
Keep
have no
going.
report on that. The next scheduled meeting for the ERC is actually May 15th, and that will be by conference call, and I will be participating and will present subsequent at the following meeting. And if you indulge me, I'll move on to C, Strategic Planning Task Force. There's no report, and I will advise when the next meeting will be scheduled.
Thank you.
Concludes
Kathleen, anything on the Continuing Professional Education Committee?
No, we did not meet.
Okay, thank you. Item E, Patty, the report on the 36th Annual Executive Directors.
Absolutely, and thank you, Ms. Salazar. Many of our topics at the 2 events crossed over, so I just shortened my highlights by about half a page. So this was a very successful conference, the NASBA Executive Directors Conference. All but 9 states were represented at this conference, so they were really happy with the turnout. Attendees included executive directors, staff, legal counsel, and representatives from the professional societies. There were ongoing discussions on issues that have previously been raised, and I'll just highlight those briefly. CE reciprocity for license renewal was discussed. CE tracking and compliance, and they talked a lot about a new CE auditing system that NASDA has created and can make available to states for their use. And we actually have already reached out to NASBA, and we're expecting them to come and do a presentation to our staff on that tracking system. So definitely more to come on that. And the ongoing discussion that everyone seems to be interested in is the legalization of cannabis. And with regard to the Guam Testing Center, I understand NASBA was instrumental in setting up that Guam Testing Center. And they did show pictures. They didn't say it, I don't recall if they actually are testing there, but they did show pictures, and they were very proud of how the facility turned out. I, of course, did let them know we also have a new facility and kind of did a compare and contrast. It was a little better.
Of course you did.
But those are the primary highlights.
Thank you. I'd like to personally thank Patty for being there and meeting face-to-face with the executive director of Florida to drive home the point of mobility, what it really meant, because it personally affected an engagement my firm was doing in Florida, and nobody there seemed to know what they were doing. Thank you so much for taking care of that.
All right.
It got resolved.
Well done,
No
you.
notification, no form, no nothing. Versus one of my partners having to apply for a license and all the obstacles that it presented itself because of misinformation. So that was really so thankful and so thoughtful. Thank you.
And we just indulge me to follow up on that comment?
Sure.
Quickly, is Florida, it has a similar process that some of the state board, or some of the boards and bureaus use in California. And that is, they have a call center, and many of the professions send all of their stakeholder calls to the call center, and the staff there are trained in answering questions for, medical board, dental board, board of accountancy. So they are attempting to be very versed in a wide range of information. Our department has a similar process. We just have elected not to utilize that for the board of accountancy. We take calls in-house and direct them to the staff with expertise in that, in their particular area. And so in this situation, it appears that that's what may have happened. A call, the phone number that's provided for Florida, that number was used. It actually was call center staff, and then misguided whether or not the individual would qualify under mobility or would have to get an actual license. And so through discussion, we were able to determine that's what happened, and then hopefully going forward, they'll have, maybe offer some better training for their call center staff.
Thank you again. Next is a report of the 23rd Annual Conference for Legal Counsel held March 13th through 15th. Dominic and Carl both were there. Any words of wisdom?
We participated in we participated in many of the same sessions that Patty did, or Ms. Bowers did. The only thing that I thought was pretty interesting on my end that was different, that we went into a lot of detail on, was blockchain and cryptocurrency and regulation on that end, and what that really means, and the difficulty that may present going forward. So I'm going to have to start reading up on blockchain. And so
good luck on that.
So other than that, no.
We demand a report.
Yeah, it was, but I found that very enlightening, and obviously having a chance to discuss numerous one-on-one not cases, but issues that were presented within our state versus other states is invaluable during those conferences.
They spent a good hunk of the time with networking with all the attorneys from the various states, talking about the current issues that they are facing and how they are resolving them. And so it's actually an invaluable mechanism to kind of get a handle on the issues that are outstanding, the issues that may come into California, and they often benefit from our own expertise. And so it's a wonderful opportunity. NASBA has its own counsel, Noel Allen and his firm, and they survey basically all the legal issues that are coming out during the year, and they give us an overview of those issues, and it's extremely valuable and helpful for the lawyers.
I see you got a little sun while you were in Florida.
Just on Friday. Forgot the sunscreen. It was a rough weekend. So.
I never even heard of Destin, Florida, but that's, where is it near?
Miramar Beach.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for attending and also for giving a presentation. Let's circle back now to the Vice President's report.
Okay, The topic covering today is appointments, reappointments to the Qualifications Committee. This item is to recommend the appointment of Charles W. Hester, CPA, and the reappointment of David Evans, CPA, to the Qualifications Committee. The Qualifications Committee assists the CBA in its licensure activities by reviewing the experience of the applicants for licensure and making recommendations to the CBA. This includes conducting work paper reviews with the applicant or the employer present to verify that responses provided are reflective of the requisite experience for licensure. I have conferred with the CBA executive officer to verify that the individuals mentioned above have met the appropriate requirements for license renewal and have demonstrated the skills and knowledge to serve as a member on the Qualifications Committee. I recommend Charles Hester, CPA, be appointed to the Qualifications Committee effective March 22nd, 2018 through March 31st, 2020.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Public comment? Call for a vote?
Okay, Alicia Burhell?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
And Kathleen Wright?
Yes.
Next item.
I also recommend David Evans, CPA, be appointed to the Qualifications Committee effective April 1st, 2018 through March 31st, 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? Public comment? Call for a vote, please.
Kathleen Wright?
Yes.
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
And Alicia Burhow?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next item is appointments, reappointments to the Peer Review Oversight Committee. This item is to recommend the appointment of Alan Lee, CPA, to the Peer Review Oversight Committee. The Peer Review Oversight Committee assists the CBA in an advisory capacity in its oversight of the peer review program. With all the appointments, I have verified that the individual has met the requirements for license renewal and has demonstrated the skills and knowledge to serve as a member on the Peer Review Oversight Committee. I recommend that Alan Lee be appointed to the Peer Review Oversight Committee effective March 22nd, 2018 through March 31st, 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? Public comment? Call for a vote, please.
Alicia Burhow?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez? Corolla Nicholson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
And Kathleen Wright?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Last but not least, we're going to talk about money. Mr. Silverman.
I'm pleased to present the mid-year financial report. The report contains a snapshot of the CBA's expenditures as of December 31st, 2017. As identified in the agenda item and reflected in attachment 1 and 2, the information primarily contains estimates based on prior year expenditures. However, the information reported for personnel services, facilities operations, and enforcement reflect actual expenditures. The DCA Budget Office is working diligently to complete all budget reporting with the new accounting software and is hopeful that that will occur by the end of April. Should this occur, we'll have more actual numbers to present at the May CBA meeting, including a report on revenues received. In the area of enforcement, the CBA's expenditures have steadily increased in prior years as reflected on attachment 3. The CBA has submitted a current year funding augmentation to DCA for its Attorney General budget. This was done in conjunction with the Attorney General's office and based on the CBA's pending inventory and potential litigation. Business and Professions Code Section 5025.2 authorizes us to request additional expenditure authority for up to $2 million that the funds are needed for public protection and to address litigation and enforcement activities. The augmentation request must be reviewed and approved by DCA, the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, and the Department of Finance. The CBA's fund condition is provided in Attachment 4 and reflects that the CBA is projected to have 22.4 months in reserve at the end of the current fiscal year. That concludes my report.
Very good. Any comments? Okay, we will adjourn. We'll start at 9 a.m. Yes.
The pink sheets that remain, they're petitions that will be done in the open session tomorrow, is that correct?
Closed session.
In closed session tomorrow, okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Question?
You have a question, comment?
I was just curious about the postage numbers on the report, Mr. Silverman, were at 90%. I don't know. It's attachments. Yeah, attachment two. Attachment one as well. I was just curious why
Deanna?
that percentage is so high.
Like the price of stamps went up, or?
Well, you'll find out
Deanne, you
why.
want to?
Yes. The postage is always high. The mailing of the update publication typically runs about $35,000 per edition. And then we're also paying for the postage for all of the renewal forms that are sent out, in addition to just the regular mailings that go out. So there's.
And the amount budget for that, just what?
We have a line item amount in there, but we have some ability to go over that as long as our bottom line is not overspent. And we're actually working with the budget office in April to better kind of true up those numbers so that the budgeted number reflects is pretty close to what we actually have been spending in prior years. So you won't necessarily see a 90% at a 6-month time frame. It'll be 90% probably at the end of the year.
And also, we're constantly looking at, electronic delivery and where we can save some money there, and balancing the interests of those who like hard copies versus electronic copies. So we're continually addressing those issues.
And that's a huge challenge. We've tried a number of
years.
things. For some reason, not all our constituents are accepting of electronic, which would save us
A ton.
$100,000 a year in 3 mailings. Anyhow, 9 a.m. tomorrow, we will start with the president's report. Other than that, great day today.
Thank you.